Deep within the frozen peaks of the Himalayas, beyond the reach of ordinary maps and modern exploration, lies perhaps the greatest mystery ever whispered about by humanity. Could there truly exist a kingdom so advanced, so mystical, that it has remained hidden from the world for thousands of years? What if the legends of Shambhala are not merely folklore, but fragments of a truth so profound that only the spiritually prepared can glimpse its reality? For centuries, explorers have vanished into the white silence of Tibet's highest mountains, searching for this legendary realm. Monks in remote monasteries speak of it in hushed tones, their eyes distant with ancient knowing. Russian mystics, German expeditions, and Tibetan lamas have all sought the same ethereal destination, a kingdom where time moves differently, where crystal cities rise from golden plains, and where the secrets of existence itself are carefully guarded. But what makes Shambhala so different from other lost civilizations? Why do the ancient texts describe it not as a place that once was, but as a realm that eternally is? The Sanskrit scriptures speak of a land where spiritual kings rule over subjects who have transcended ordinary human limitations. They describe technologies that blend matter and consciousness, architecture that defies physical laws, and wisdom that could transform our understanding of reality itself. Perhaps most intriguingly, the prophecies surrounding Shambhala suggest it is not merely a hidden kingdom, but a dimensional gateway, a place where the boundaries between the material and spiritual worlds dissolve. The texts speak of a time when this mystical realm will reveal itself to humanity, when the world needs its ancient wisdom most desperately. Is Shambhala calling to us even now, hidden in plain sight behind veils of consciousness we have yet to pierce? Could it be that this legendary kingdom exists not in our physical dimension, but in the spaces between thoughts, in the silence between heartbeats, in the eternal now that mystics have always known? Tonight, we embark on a journey through the mists of legend and into the heart of one of humanity's most enduring mysteries. Let the ancient wisdom of Shambhala guide you into peaceful rest as we explore the secrets of the timeless kingdom that may be closer than you ever imagined. What ancient wisdom was so profound that it required an entire mystical kingdom to preserve it? How did the first whispers of Shambhala emerge from the mists of prehistory to capture the imagination of seekers across millennia? Could it be that this legendary realm was never meant to be found by ordinary means, but rather discovered through the expansion of human consciousness itself? In the depths of Sanskrit literature, woven through the sacred texts of Buddhism and Hinduism like golden threads in an eternal tapestry, the name Shambhala first appeared to the world. The word itself carries within it the essence of its mystery, derived from the Sanskrit Shambhu, meaning happiness or bliss, and Ala, meaning place or abode. Here was a land dedicated not merely to physical prosperity, but to the cultivation of pure joy and spiritual fulfillment. The earliest references to this mystical kingdom can be traced to the Kalachakra Tantra, one of the most esoteric and complex texts in the Buddhist canon, written sometime between the 10th and 11th centuries. Though claiming to preserve wisdom from thousands of years earlier, the Kalachakra speaks of Shambhala as both a physical realm and a state of consciousness. This dual nature would become central to understanding why the kingdom remained so elusive to material seekers, while revealing itself readily to those who approached with spiritual preparation. The Kalachakra Tantra itself is a masterpiece of mystical literature, containing over 600 verses that describe not only the nature of Shambhala, but the cosmic cycles of time, the relationship between consciousness and reality, and the ultimate destiny of human spiritual evolution. The text presents Shambhala as existing at the intersection of multiple dimensions, a place where the laws of physics as understood by ordinary minds cease to apply, and where the deeper structures of existence reveal themselves to those prepared to perceive them. According to these ancient texts, Shambhala was founded in a time when the world was younger and the barriers between dimensions were thinner. The kingdom was established by the first of the Kalki kings, rulers who possessed not just temporal power, but mastery over the very forces of existence. These weren't ordinary monarchs wielding swords and commanding armies, but enlightened beings who governed through wisdom, compassion, and an understanding of cosmic law that transcended ordinary human comprehension. The founding legend tells of a great spiritual teacher who received the Kalachakra teachings directly from the Buddha himself. This teacher, known as the first Kalki, was instructed to establish a kingdom where these precious teachings could be preserved and developed, protected from the darkness and ignorance that would periodically sweep across the world. The location chosen was said to be in the far north, beyond the Sita River, in a land ringed by snow-capped mountains that formed a natural barrier against the uninitiated. But the geography of Shambhala, as described in the texts, defied ordinary understanding. The kingdom was said to be circular, divided into 8 regions radiating outward from a central area like the petals of a lotus flower. At its heart stood the capital city of Kalapa, where the Kalki king resided in a palace that seemed to be constructed from crystallized light itself. The entire realm was described as being surrounded by a wall of mountains so high they touched the sky, with only certain passes allowing entry to those who possessed the proper spiritual keys. The landscape of Shambhala was portrayed as a paradise beyond earthly comparison. Rivers of crystal clear water flowed in perfect spirals through valleys carpeted with flowers that bloomed perpetually, their colors shifting with the spiritual states of those who observed them. Trees bore fruit that nourished not just the body but the soul, their leaves rustling with the sound of mantras carried on winds that seemed to whisper secrets of the cosmos. The very soil of the kingdom was said to be composed of ground gems and precious metals, but these material riches were considered the least of Shambhala's treasures. The early Buddhist texts describe Shambhala as a place where the normal rules of time and space operated differently. A day in the kingdom was said to equal a year in the outside world, suggesting that the realm existed in a temporal dimension distinct from ordinary reality. This wasn't mere fantasy, but a sophisticated understanding of how consciousness and time interrelate, concepts that modern quantum physics would later explore in its own way. The inhabitants of Shambhala experienced time as a fluid medium that could be navigated consciously, allowing them to perceive past, present, and future as aspects of an eternal now. The inhabitants of Shambhala were described as beings who had transcended the ordinary limitations of human existence. They lived for hundreds of years, possessed telepathic abilities, and had access to technologies that combined spiritual wisdom with material innovation. Their cities were said to be illuminated by a light that came not from the sun or fire, but from the accumulated merit and wisdom of their inhabitants. The very air of the kingdom vibrated with mantras and prayers, creating an atmosphere where spiritual development was not just possible but inevitable. These beings were not born into their elevated state, but had earned their place in Shambhala through countless lifetimes of spiritual practice and selfless service. They appeared as humans, but possessed capabilities that would seem miraculous to ordinary perception. They could communicate without words, travel by projecting their consciousness across vast distances, and manipulate matter through the power of focused intention. Their bodies were said to be composed of a subtle substance that was neither fully physical nor purely spiritual, allowing them to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The society of Shambhala was organized around principles of perfect harmony and spiritual development. There were no conflicts, no scarcity, and no suffering as understood in the ordinary world. Every inhabitant was both teacher and student, constantly learning and sharing wisdom in an endless cycle of growth and enlightenment. The kingdom functioned as a vast university where the curriculum included not just intellectual knowledge, but direct experience of the deepest truths of existence. The Kalachakra Tantra speaks of 32 kings who would rule Shambhala in succession, each one maintaining and expanding the spiritual and temporal power of the realm. These rulers were not hereditary monarchs, but enlightened beings who assumed the throne when their consciousness had developed to the point where they could serve as guardians of the ancient wisdom. Each king was said to rule for approximately 100 years, during which time they would further develop the spiritual sciences and prepare for the eventual role that Shambhala would play in world events. The The first 7 kings of Shambhala were known as the Dharmarajas, or kings of Dharma, who established the spiritual foundations of the kingdom. They were followed by 25 Kalki kings, each of whom would contribute to the preservation and expansion of the sacred teachings. The texts describe these rulers as possessing qualities that combined the wisdom of the greatest sages with the practical skills needed to govern a perfect society. They were masters of meditation, skilled in the arts of healing and transformation, and capable of perceiving the karmic patterns that shape the destiny of individuals and civilizations. The prophecies surrounding Shambhala speak of a time when the world would fall into darkness, when materialism and ignorance would dominate human consciousness, and when the very survival of spiritual wisdom would be threatened. At this crucial moment, the 32nd and final Kalki king would emerge from Shambhala at the head of a great army, not to conquer through violence, but to restore Dharma and spiritual understanding to the world. This wouldn't be a physical war in the conventional sense, but a cosmic battle between the forces of wisdom and ignorance, played out on both material and spiritual planes. The texts describe this final king as possessing powers that would seem miraculous to ordinary perception. He would be able to travel instantaneously across vast distances, appear simultaneously in multiple locations, and communicate directly with the consciousness of all living beings. His army would consist not of soldiers bearing conventional weapons, but of awakened beings whose very presence would dispel the darkness of ignorance and reveal the truth that had been hidden for centuries. This prophetic vision of Shambhala's ultimate revelation to the world was not presented as a distant future event, but as an inevitable culmination of cosmic cycles that were already in motion. The texts suggested that the signs of the approaching time were already visible to those who knew how to interpret them. The spread of materialistic philosophies, the decline of spiritual understanding, the rise of technologies that could connect minds across vast distances, and the emergence of global conflicts that threatened the very survival of human civilization. As the legend of Shambhala spread beyond its original Sanskrit sources, it began to appear in various forms throughout Asian spiritual traditions. Tibetan Buddhism embraced the concept wholeheartedly, with the Dalai Lamas and other high lamas claiming to maintain spiritual connections with the kingdom. The Tibetan versions of the story often emphasized the accessibility of Shambhala through meditation and spiritual practice, suggesting that the kingdom could be reached not just by physical travel, but through the development of higher consciousness. The Tibetan tradition developed elaborate practices for connecting with Shambhala, including specific meditations, visualizations, and rituals designed to open the consciousness to the kingdom's influence. Advanced practitioners claimed to travel to Shambhala in their dreams or through out-of-body experiences, returning with detailed descriptions of the kingdom's wonders and wisdom teachings that were then incorporated into Tibetan Buddhist practice. Mongolian traditions added their own elements to the Shambhala legend, often connecting it with their shamanistic beliefs about spirit worlds and the ability of trained practitioners to journey between different realms of existence. The Mongols spoke of horsemen who had seen the golden spires of Shambhala gleaming in the distance across the steppes, only to have the vision vanish when they attempted to approach with ordinary consciousness. Their shamans developed rituals for invoking the protection and guidance of the Shambhala kings, treating the kingdom as a source of spiritual power that could be accessed through proper ceremonial procedures. The influence of the Shambhala legend extended far beyond religious circles, inspiring poets, artists, and visionaries throughout the centuries. The idea of a hidden kingdom where spiritual wisdom was preserved and perfected captured the imagination of anyone who sensed that the world contained mysteries beyond the reach of ordinary understanding. The legend suggested that somewhere, beyond the chaos and confusion of ordinary existence, there existed a place where truth was not just known, but lived, where the highest human potentials were not just dreamed about, but actualized. Persian mystics incorporated elements of the Shambhala legend into their own teachings about hidden spiritual centers and the hierarchy of enlightened beings who guided human evolution from behind the scenes. The Sufi tradition spoke of similar hidden realms where the friends of God worked tirelessly for the spiritual welfare of humanity, and many scholars have noted the remarkable parallels between these teachings and the Sanskrit descriptions of Shambhala. The power of the Shambhala legend lay not just in its promise of a perfect kingdom, but in its suggestion that such perfection was achievable through human effort and spiritual development. Unlike many paradise myths that placed their golden realms in an unreachable afterlife, Shambhala was described as existing in the here and now, accessible to those who developed the proper understanding and prepared themselves through spiritual practice. The text spoke of various signs that would indicate the approach of the time when Shambhala would reveal itself to the world. These included the spread of materialistic philosophies, the decline of spiritual understanding, the rise of technologies that could connect minds across vast distances, and the emergence of global conflicts that threatened the very survival of human civilization. To many who studied these prophecies, the modern world seemed to be displaying exactly these characteristics, suggesting that the time of Shambhala's emergence might be approaching. Yet the legend also contained warnings about the dangers of seeking Shambhala with impure motivations. The texts spoke of those who would attempt to reach the kingdom through force or cunning, driven by desires for power or material gain. Such seekers, no matter how skilled or determined, would find themselves turned away by the very nature of the realm they sought to enter. Shambhala revealed itself only to those whose hearts were pure and whose intentions were aligned with the highest good of all beings. The spiritual requirements for approaching Shambhala were described in great detail in the ancient texts. Seekers needed to have developed not just intellectual understanding, but genuine compassion for all living beings. They needed to have transcended personal desires for worldly success and dedicated themselves completely to the service of truth and wisdom. Most importantly, they needed to have recognized the fundamental unity that underlies all apparent diversity, seeing themselves not as separate individuals but as aspects of the one consciousness that manifests as all beings. The birth of the Shambhala legend thus represented something far more profound than the creation of another spiritual myth. It marked the emergence of a vision that would inspire seekers for millennia, offering the promise that human consciousness could transcend its apparent limitations, and that perfect wisdom and compassion were not just ideals but achievable realities. The kingdom of Shambhala stood as a beacon of hope, suggesting that somewhere beyond the horizons of ordinary perception, the highest human potentials were not just preserved, but actively cultivated. As we delve deeper into the mysteries of this legendary realm, we begin to understand that Shambhala was never just about a hidden kingdom waiting to be discovered by intrepid explorers. It was about the recognition that within each human being lies the potential for the same wisdom and compassion that the Kalki kings were said to embody. The true search for Shambhala, the text suggested, was not an external journey through physical landscapes, but an internal voyage through the vast territories of consciousness itself. The legend continued to evolve and spread, adapting to different cultural contexts, while maintaining its essential message about the possibility of human spiritual transformation. In each tradition that embraced it, Shambhala took on new dimensions and meanings, but always retained its fundamental promise that perfection was not just a dream, but a living reality that could be achieved through dedication, wisdom, and compassion. The ancient texts also spoke of the methods by which individuals could prepare themselves for eventual contact with Shambhala. These included not just meditation and prayer, but practical activities designed to develop the qualities that would make one worthy of the kingdom's attention. Practitioners were encouraged to cultivate patience, humility, and selfless service, recognizing that the path to Shambhala was not a quick journey, but a gradual transformation of consciousness that might take many lifetimes to complete. The ancient manuscripts describe in vivid detail the process by which individuals might prepare themselves for eventual contact with Shambhala. The texts speak of 7 stages of purification that must be completed before one could even hope to glimpse the kingdom's borders. The first stage involved the cultivation of perfect compassion, not just as an intellectual concept, but as a living reality that permeated every thought, word, and action. Practitioners were required to demonstrate this compassion not just toward friends and family, but toward all living beings, including those who might be considered enemies or obstacles. The second stage required the development of unwavering faith, not blind belief, but a deep conviction born from direct experience of spiritual truths. This faith had to be tested through trials and challenges that would shake the very foundations of ordinary understanding. Many seekers found themselves confronted with situations that seemed designed to shatter their preconceptions about reality, forcing them to choose between the comfort of familiar illusions and the sometimes harsh light of genuine wisdom. The third stage demanded the cultivation of perfect patience, the ability to wait for spiritual development to unfold naturally without forcing or manipulating the process. This patience extended beyond personal practice to encompass a deep understanding of the cosmic cycles that governed all existence. Seekers learned to recognize that Shambhala revealed itself according to divine timing, not human schedules, and that attempts to rush or circumvent this natural process would only delay the ultimate goal. The fourth stage involved the development of perfect generosity, the willingness to give not just material possessions but one's very life in service of truth and the welfare of all beings. This generosity had to be absolutely pure, motivated not by desire for reward or recognition, but by the spontaneous overflow of wisdom and compassion. The texts describe how genuine practitioners would find themselves naturally drawn to acts of service, feeling no sense of sacrifice or loss, but rather experiencing deep joy in the opportunity to benefit others. The fifth stage required the cultivation of perfect moral conduct, behavior that was naturally aligned with cosmic harmony without the need for external rules or regulations. This conduct arose spontaneously from the recognition of the fundamental interconnectedness of all existence. Practitioners found that actions which might harm others became literally impossible, not because they were forbidden, but because they were recognized as harmful to one's own deepest nature. The sixth stage involved the development of perfect concentration, the ability to focus consciousness with laser-like precision while simultaneously maintaining awareness of the totality of existence. This concentration was not the narrow fixation of ordinary meditation, but a dynamic state of consciousness that could encompass multiple dimensions of reality simultaneously. Practitioners learned to navigate between different levels of awareness as easily as walking from one room to another. The seventh and final stage required the cultivation of perfect wisdom, the direct perception of the true nature of reality that transcended all concepts and categories. This wisdom was not intellectual understanding, but a transformation of consciousness itself, a fundamental shift in the very ground of being that made one capable of participating in the divine nature of Shambhala's inhabitants. The texts also describe the various obstacles that seekers might encounter on their journey towards Shambhala. These obstacles were not external challenges but internal resistances that arose from the ego's attachment to familiar patterns of thinking and being. The first major obstacle was spiritual pride, the tendency to become attached to one's spiritual accomplishments and to see oneself as superior to others. This pride could manifest in subtle ways, such as the belief that one was specially chosen or destined for spiritual greatness, or in more obvious forms such as the desire to be recognized as a teacher or guide. The second obstacle was spiritual materialism, the tendency to collect spiritual experiences and teachings as if they were possessions to be accumulated and displayed. This materialism could lead seekers to become spiritual tourists, sampling various traditions and practices without ever committing deeply to the transformative process that genuine spiritual development required. The texts warned that such superficial engagement with spiritual matters would actually move one further from Shambhala rather than closer to it. The third obstacle was spiritual bypassing, the tendency to use spiritual concepts and practices to avoid dealing with practical aspects of life or psychological issues that required attention. The texts made it clear that the path to Shambhala did not lead away from the world, but through it, and that genuine spiritual development required the integration of wisdom and compassion into every aspect of daily existence. The fourth obstacle was spiritual narcissism, the tendency to become so focused on one's own spiritual development that one lost sight of the ultimate goal of serving all beings. The texts emphasized that Shambhala existed not for the benefit of those who dwelt within it, but for the welfare of all conscious beings throughout the universe. Any seeker who lost sight of this universal perspective would find themselves unable to progress further on the path. The manuscripts also contain detailed descriptions of the various signs and portents that would indicate when an individual was approaching readiness for contact with Shambhala. These signs were not external phenomena but internal transformations that reflected the deep changes occurring in consciousness. The first sign was the spontaneous arising of universal compassion, a love that embraced all beings without distinction or preference. This compassion was not sentimental emotion, but a recognition of the fundamental unity that underlies all apparent diversity. The second sign was the development of prophetic dreams and visions that provided guidance and instruction for the spiritual journey. These dreams were not mere fantasies, but direct communications from the consciousness of Shambhala's inhabitants, who were said to maintain constant awareness of all sincere seekers and to provide assistance and encouragement when needed. The dreams often contained symbolic imagery that required careful interpretation, but they always pointed toward the next steps that needed to be taken on the path. The third sign was the appearance of synchronicities and meaningful coincidences that seemed to guide the seeker toward people, places, and experiences that would support their spiritual development. These synchronicities were understood not as random events, but as expressions of the interconnected web of consciousness that connected all beings and all events in a vast pattern of meaning and purpose. The fourth sign was the development of psychic abilities such as telepathy, clairvoyance, and precognition. However, the texts warned that these abilities were not goals in themselves, but natural byproducts of consciousness expansion. Seekers who became fascinated with psychic phenomena and began to use them for personal advantage would find their spiritual progress blocked, while those who treated them as natural expressions of their developing consciousness would continue to evolve toward higher states of awareness. The ancient sources also describe the various ways in which Shambhala communicated with the outside world. Even while remaining hidden from ordinary perception, the kingdom was said to send forth emanations of its consciousness in the form of inspired teachings, artistic creations, and technological innovations that would appear in different cultures and time periods. These emanations were not random, but were carefully timed to provide exactly the guidance and inspiration that humanity needed at particular moments in its evolution. The texts speak of hidden libraries and archives scattered throughout the world, containing fragments of Shambhala's wisdom preserved in various forms. These repositories were not physical locations, but consciousness-based storage systems that could be accessed by those who developed the proper spiritual keys. Advanced practitioners claim to have accessed these libraries through meditation and contemplation, returning with knowledge and insights that had been lost to ordinary human understanding for centuries. The legend of Shambhala also speaks of the kingdom's relationship with other hidden spiritual centers scattered throughout the world. These centers were described as forming a network of consciousness that maintained the spiritual balance of the planet, working together to guide human evolution and prevent the complete destruction of wisdom and compassion. Each center had its own specific function and area of expertise, but all were ultimately connected to Shambhala as the primary source of spiritual authority and guidance. The texts describe how these hidden centers communicated with each other through methods that transcended ordinary time and space. Their inhabitants could project their consciousness across vast distances, sharing information and coordinating their activities for the benefit of all beings. This network of consciousness was said to be responsible for many of the great spiritual and cultural achievements of human civilization, working behind the scenes to inspire and guide those who would contribute to the evolution of human consciousness. As the legend of Shambhala spread throughout the world, it began to influence not just religious and spiritual traditions but also literature, art, and philosophy. The image of a hidden kingdom where wisdom and compassion reigned supreme captured the imagination of poets and artists who saw in it a vision of what human civilization could become if it were guided by spiritual rather than material values. The legend suggested that somewhere, beyond the chaos and confusion of ordinary existence, there existed a place where the highest human potentials were not just dreamed about, but actually realized. The influence of the Shambhala legend can be seen in the works of countless writers and thinkers who have sought to imagine what a truly enlightened society might look like. From Plato's Republic to Thomas More's Utopia, from the legends of Camelot to the science fiction visions of advanced civilizations, the dream of Shambhala has provided a template for humanity's highest aspirations. The legend has continued to evolve and adapt to different cultural contexts, while maintaining its essential message about the possibility of human transformation and the reality of higher states of consciousness. The legend had been born, and with it, a dream that would inspire countless seekers to look beyond the ordinary world and glimpse the extraordinary possibilities that lay hidden within the very fabric of existence. In the quiet monasteries of Tibet, in the windswept steppes of Mongolia, in the hearts of mystics and visionaries across the world, the whispered name of Shambhala continued to kindle the flame of spiritual aspiration, promising that somewhere, somehow, the perfect kingdom of wisdom and compassion was not just a dream, but a living reality waiting to be discovered. What ancient cartographers dared to map the unmappable, sketching pathways to a realm that existed beyond the boundaries of ordinary geography? How did the sacred maps of Shambhala come to be created, and what secrets did they contain for those brave enough to follow their cryptic directions? Could it be that these mysterious charts were not merely guides to physical locations, but blueprints for navigating the hidden dimensions of consciousness itself? Deep within the treasure vaults of Tibet's most ancient monasteries, hidden away from the eyes of the uninitiated, lie maps unlike any others ever created by human hands. These are not ordinary charts showing rivers, mountains, and cities, but sacred diagrams that attempt to capture the location of Shambhala itself. Each line, each symbol, each carefully placed marker represents not just geographical information but spiritual instruction, encoded in a language that only the most advanced practitioners can fully comprehend. The creation of these maps began in the earliest days of Buddhism's arrival in Tibet, when the first monks to receive the Kalachakra teachings recognized the need to preserve not just the philosophical content of the tradition, but also the practical guidance for reaching the legendary kingdom. These early cartographers were not merely skilled draftsmen, but accomplished mystics who claimed to have received their information through direct spiritual communication with the inhabitants of Shambhala itself. The most famous of these sacred maps is the one preserved in the Patala Palace in Lhasa, a document so revered that it has been viewed by fewer than a dozen people in the last century. Drawn on specially prepared yak hide using inks made from powdered gems and precious metals, the map shows Shambhala as a series of concentric circles surrounded by mountain ranges that form natural barriers against intrusion. The kingdom itself is depicted as a vast lotus flower, its 8 petals representing the 8 regions that radiate outward from the central capital of Kalapa. But the true significance of this map lies not in its physical details, but in its spiritual symbolism. Each element of the drawing corresponds to a specific state of consciousness that must be achieved before one can hope to perceive the reality it represents. The outer mountains are not just geographical features, but represent the barriers of ignorance and attachment that must be overcome before spiritual truth can be glimpsed. The rivers that flow through the kingdom are not merely waterways, but streams of consciousness that carry the aspirant toward higher states of awareness. The map's most intriguing feature is its indication of the various paths that lead to Shambhala from different points around the world. These paths are shown not as straight lines, but as complex spirals and curves that seem to follow patterns based on sacred geometry and astronomical alignments. The The routes change according to the spiritual development of the seeker, with different paths becoming visible or accessible based on the individual's level of consciousness and karmic preparation. One of the most detailed path descriptions comes from the chronicles of the Tashilhunpo monastery, which speak of a route that begins in the sacred valley of Kathmandu and leads northward through a series of increasingly difficult trials and tests. The first stage of this journey takes the seeker through the conventional landscapes of Nepal and Tibet, following pilgrim routes that have been used for centuries by devout Buddhists seeking enlightenment in the high places of the world. But as the journey progresses, the landscape begins to change in ways that defy ordinary understanding. The mountains become higher and more luminous, their snow-capped peaks seeming to glow with an inner light that is visible only to those whose spiritual perception has been sufficiently developed. The air itself becomes thinner and more rarefied, requiring not just physical acclimatization, but a corresponding refinement of consciousness that allows the seeker to function in increasingly subtle dimensions of reality. The chronicles describe how the path eventually leads to a great glacier, impossibly blue and transparent, that serves as a kind of dimensional gateway. Those who attempt to cross this glacier without proper spiritual preparation find themselves turned back by mysterious forces, their memories of the experience fading like half-remembered dreams. But those who have completed the necessary inner work discover that the glacier is not a barrier, but a bridge, a crystalline pathway that leads directly into the heart of Shambhala itself. Another route described in the ancient texts begins in the Gobi Desert, where nomadic shamans have long spoken of hidden passages that lead to underground kingdoms. This path requires the seeker to enter a state of consciousness that allows them to perceive the subtle energies that flow beneath the surface of the earth. The journey begins at specific power spots in the desert, locations where the barriers between dimensions are naturally thin and where properly prepared individuals can slip from one reality to another. The Gobi route is particularly treacherous because it requires the seeker to navigate not just physical hazards, but psychological tests that can drive the unprepared to madness. The desert itself becomes a kind of mirror, reflecting back all of the seeker's fears, desires, and unresolved conflicts in forms that seem absolutely real. Only those who have learned to recognize these projections as creations of their own mind can continue forward, while others become lost in labyrinths of their own making. The texts describe how successful travelers on this route eventually come to an oasis that appears to be completely ordinary, but is actually a camouflaged entrance to a vast underground network of tunnels and chambers. These tunnels, carved from living rock and illuminated by a phosphorescent light that seems to emanate from the stone itself, extend for hundreds of miles beneath the Earth's surface, eventually emerging in the hidden valleys of Shambhala. A third route, known only to the most advanced practitioners, begins not in any physical location, but in the depths of meditation itself. This path requires the seeker to develop the ability to project their consciousness outside of their physical body and to navigate the subtle realms that exist parallel to our ordinary reality. The journey begins in the familiar territory of the seeker's own mind, but gradually expands outward to encompass increasingly vast and exotic landscapes of consciousness. The meditative route to Shambhala is described as the most direct, but also the most dangerous, because it requires the seeker to abandon all familiar reference points and to trust completely in the guidance of higher wisdom. Those who attempt this path without proper preparation risk becoming lost in the maze of their own subconscious, or worse, encountering entities and forces that exist in the subtle realms and that may not have humanity's best interests at heart. The successful completion of this inner journey is said to result in a direct encounter with the consciousness of Shambhala itself, an experience that transcends all ordinary categories of perception and understanding. The seeker finds themselves standing in the presence of the Kalki King, not as a physical meeting, but as a communion of consciousness that imparts wisdom and guidance directly, without the need for words or concepts. The maps also contain detailed information about the various trials and tests that seekers must pass before they can gain entry to Shambhala. These tests are not arbitrary obstacles, but necessary stages in the development of consciousness that ensure only those those who are truly ready can access the kingdom's secrets. The first test typically involves a confrontation with one's own shadow, the darker aspects of personality that must be acknowledged and integrated before spiritual progress can continue. The second test usually involves a period of complete solitude, during which the seeker must learn to find fulfillment and meaning without any external support or validation. This test can last for months or even years, depending on the individual's spiritual development and the strength of their attachment to worldly concerns. Many seekers find this stage the most difficult, as it requires them to confront the deep loneliness and anxiety that modern life often keeps hidden beneath layers of distraction and busyness. The third test involves a demonstration of perfect compassion, often in the form of a seemingly impossible choice between personal welfare and the benefit of others. The seeker might be required to give up their most precious possessions, or to sacrifice their own spiritual advancement for the sake of helping someone else. Only those who can make such choices without hesitation or regret demonstrate the level of selflessness required for citizenship in Shambhala. The fourth test involves a direct encounter with the forces of ignorance and negativity that oppose spiritual development. This test often takes the form of a psychic battle, where the seeker must use their spiritual power to protect themselves and others from entities that seek to destroy or corrupt the light of wisdom. The test is not about winning through force, but about maintaining perfect equanimity and compassion even in the face of apparent evil. The fifth and final test involves a complete surrender of the ego, a willingness to dissolve the boundaries of individual identity in service of universal truth. This test cannot be passed through effort or will, but only through the grace that comes from complete spiritual maturity. Those who successfully complete this test find that they no longer exist as separate individuals, but have become expressions of the universal consciousness that animates all existence. The maps also contain information about the various guardians and protectors who watch over the paths to Shambhala, ensuring that only those who are truly ready can complete the journey. These guardians are described not as physical beings, but as concentrated expressions of spiritual power that can take whatever form is necessary to test or assist the seeker. They might appear as fierce demons to challenge the seeker's courage, or as beautiful temptresses to test their detachment from worldly pleasures, or as wise teachers to provide guidance and instruction. The relationship between the seeker and these guardians is said to be one of mutual respect and understanding. The guardians are not enemies to be defeated, but allies whose function is to ensure that the seeker's spiritual development proceeds at the proper pace and in the proper direction. They provide exactly the challenges and opportunities that each individual needs for their continued growth, adapting their approach to the specific requirements of each seeker's karmic situation. The ancient texts also describe the various landmarks and waypoints that mark the journey to Shambhala, each one representing a specific stage in the development of consciousness. The first major landmark is typically a great mountain that appears to be impossibly tall and steep, representing the initial challenge of overcoming the gravity of ordinary consciousness and beginning the ascent toward higher states of awareness. The second landmark is usually a vast lake or sea that must be crossed, representing the emotional purification that is necessary before rational thought can be transcended. The waters of this lake are said to be crystal clear, but also infinitely deep, reflecting back to the seeker all of their emotional patterns and psychological complexes that need to be resolved before further progress is possible. The third landmark is often a great forest or jungle that the seeker must navigate, representing the complexity of spiritual teaching and the danger of becoming lost in intellectual understanding without direct experience. The trees in this forest are said to whisper ancient secrets to those who know how to listen, but they can also lead the unwary astray with misleading information or partial truths. The fourth landmark is typically a desert or wasteland that must be crossed, representing the period of spiritual dryness and apparent abandonment that often precedes the final breakthrough to higher consciousness. This desert is said to be both the most difficult and the most important stage of the journey, as it is here that the seeker must learn to find sustenance and direction from purely internal sources. The fifth and final landmark is usually a great city or temple that represents the culmination of the journey and the seeker's arrival at the threshold of Shambhala itself. This city is described as being built from materials that seem to be made of crystallized light and sound, its architecture defying the normal laws of physics and geometry. The city serves as a kind of decompression chamber, allowing the seeker to gradually adjust to the higher vibrational frequencies that characterize life in Shambhala. The maps also contain detailed instructions for the various preparations that must be made before attempting the journey to Shambhala. These preparations are not just practical matters like gathering supplies and planning routes, but spiritual practices that must be completed to ensure the seeker's readiness for the challenges ahead. The texts emphasize that attempting the journey without proper preparation is not just dangerous, but counterproductive, as it can actually impede spiritual development rather than advance it. The first preparation involves the cultivation of perfect physical health and vitality, not through ordinary exercise and diet, but through practices that purify and strengthen the subtle energy systems of the body. The seeker must learn to work with the life force directly, developing the ability to sustain themselves on increasingly subtle forms of nourishment as they progress toward the higher dimensions where Shambhala exists. The second preparation involves the development of emotional equilibrium and psychological stability, the ability to remain centered and peaceful regardless of external circumstances. This requires not just the suppression of negative emotions, but their transformation into positive qualities that can serve the spiritual journey. Anger becomes dynamic energy for overcoming obstacles. Fear becomes discriminating wisdom that recognizes genuine dangers, and desire becomes the fuel for spiritual aspiration. The third preparation involves the cultivation of intellectual clarity and the ability to distinguish between truth and illusion, between genuine spiritual experience and mere fantasy or wishful thinking. The seeker must develop a kind of spiritual discrimination that can penetrate beneath surface appearances and perceive the underlying reality of any situation. This discrimination is not cold rationality, but a warm intuitive wisdom that combines the best qualities of both heart and mind. The fourth preparation involves the development of spiritual will, the ability to persist in spiritual practice despite obstacles, setbacks, and periods of apparent failure. This will is not mere stubbornness, but a deep commitment to truth that remains constant regardless of personal comfort or convenience. The seeker must be willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of spiritual realization, while simultaneously maintaining perfect detachment from the results of their efforts. The fifth and final preparation involves the cultivation of divine love, an unconditional compassion that extends to all beings without exception. This love is not sentimental emotion, but a recognition of the fundamental unity that underlies all apparent diversity. The seeker must learn to see the divine nature in everyone and everything, even in those who appear to be enemies or obstacles to spiritual progress. The sacred maps of Shambhala thus represent far more than mere geographical charts or travel guides. They are comprehensive manuals for spiritual transformation, containing within their symbolic language all the wisdom and guidance necessary for the complete awakening of human consciousness. Each line and symbol contains layers of meaning that can only be fully appreciated by those who have begun the journey themselves, discovering through direct experience the truth that the maps can only point toward. The creation and preservation of these maps represents one of humanity's greatest achievements, a successful attempt to capture in symbolic form the essence of the spiritual path and to provide future generations with the guidance they would need to continue the eternal quest for truth and enlightenment. In the quiet monasteries where these treasures are preserved, monks continue to study and contemplate their mysteries, preparing themselves for the day when they might follow the paths described within their sacred pages. The maps remain, waiting patiently for those who are ready to undertake the greatest adventure possible for human consciousness. The journey to Shambhala, the legendary kingdom where all spiritual seeking finds its ultimate fulfillment. In their careful preservation and continued study, we see evidence of humanity's unwavering belief in the possibility of transcendence and the reality of higher states of consciousness that await those brave enough to seek them out. Who were the brave souls who dared to leave behind the safety of the known world to seek the legendary kingdom of Shambhala? What drove these intrepid explorers to venture into the most remote and dangerous regions of the earth, following nothing but whispered legends and cryptic maps? Could it be that their journeys, whether successful or not, left behind traces of wisdom that continue to guide seekers even today? Throughout history, there have been those who could not resist the call of Shambhala, individuals whose hearts burned with such intense longing for truth that they were willing to sacrifice everything in pursuit of the legendary kingdom. These were not ordinary adventurers seeking fame or fortune, but spiritual seekers driven by an inner compulsion that they could neither ignore nor fully explain. Their stories, preserved in fragments of journals, letters, and oral traditions, paint a picture of humanity's eternal quest for transcendence and the prices that some are willing to pay for even a glimpse of ultimate truth. Among the most famous of these seekers was Nicholas Roerich, the Russian artist, philosopher, and mystic who organized one of the most ambitious expeditions ever undertaken in search of Shambhala. Born into a world of privilege and artistic achievement, Roerich had everything that conventional society could offer, yet he found himself drawn irresistibly toward the mysteries of the East and the promise of spiritual realization that lay hidden in the mountains of Central Asia. Roerich's journey began not with a physical expedition, but with years of intensive study and spiritual preparation. He immersed himself in the sacred texts of Buddhism and Hinduism, learning to read the symbolic language in which the ancient wisdom was encoded. He studied with teachers who claimed to have direct knowledge of the hidden kingdom, absorbing their teachings and preparing himself for the challenges that lay ahead. The expedition that Roerich eventually organized was unlike any that had come before. It was not merely a geographical exploration, but a spiritual quest, guided by principles that transcended ordinary scientific methodology. The team included not just skilled mountaineers and experienced guides, but also artists, philosophers, and mystics who were capable of perceiving the subtle dimensions of reality that conventional explorers might miss entirely. The journey began in the bustling markets of Kashmir, where Roerich and his companions spent months gathering supplies and information from the local population. They spoke with traders who had traveled the high passes of the Himalayas, with monks who had spent decades in meditation retreats, and with nomads who claimed to have seen strange lights dancing in the mountains during the darkest nights of winter. As the expedition moved deeper into the mountains, the landscape began to change in ways that defied rational explanation. The team reported encountering weather patterns that seemed to respond to their thoughts and emotions, with sudden storms arising when they experienced doubt or fear, and brilliant sunshine breaking through the clouds when their spirits were lifted by hope and determination. The most remarkable aspect of Roerich's journey was not what he found, but what found him. The expedition members reported numerous encounters with mysterious figures who appeared and disappeared without explanation, offering guidance and assistance before vanishing into the mists like apparitions from another world. These encounters were not brief glimpses but extended conversations, during which the mysterious figures shared detailed information about the geography of the region and the spiritual significance of various landmarks. One particularly significant encounter occurred at a high mountain pass, where the expedition was struggling with altitude sickness and dwindling supplies. A figure appeared who seemed to be a local shepherd, but who spoke with an authority and wisdom that belied his simple appearance. He provided the team with food and medicine that seemed to restore their strength completely, and he gave them detailed directions to a hidden valley where they could rest and resupply. When the team followed these directions, they discovered not just a valley, but an entire hidden ecosystem complete with flowing streams, abundant wildlife, and vegetation that seemed to thrive despite the harsh altitude and climate. The valley appeared on none of their maps, and when they attempted to return to it later, they found that it had seemingly vanished, as if it had never existed at all. The most mysterious aspect of Roerik's expedition was the discovery of what appeared to be ancient ruins scattered throughout the high mountains, structures that seemed to be far older than any known civilization in the region. These ruins were not built from ordinary stone, but from a material that seemed to be crystallized light, translucent and luminous even in the absence of direct sunlight. The structures showed no signs of weathering or decay, as if they existed in a state of perfect preservation that defied the normal passage of time. The expedition's artist members attempted to document these ruins through drawings and paintings, but they found that their artistic materials seemed inadequate to capture the true nature of what they were seeing. The structures seemed to shift and change depending on the viewer's state of consciousness, appearing as simple stone formations to those who approached with purely rational minds, but revealing their true crystalline nature to those who were open to spiritual perception. Another remarkable traveler in search of Shambhala was Helena Blavatsky, the founder of the Theosophical Society, who claimed to have received direct communications from the Masters of Wisdom who dwelt in the Hidden Kingdom. Blavatsky's approach to finding Shambhala was quite different from Roerik's physical expedition, focusing instead on the development of psychic abilities and the cultivation of direct spiritual perception. Blavatsky spent years training her consciousness to travel beyond the boundaries of ordinary perception, learning to project her awareness into the subtle realms where Shambhala was said to exist. She described these journeys as more real and vivid than ordinary physical experience, involving all the senses but in a heightened and refined way that allowed her to perceive aspects of reality that were normally hidden from human awareness. Through these inner journeys, Blavatsky claimed to have established ongoing contact with the spiritual hierarchy that governed Shambhala, receiving teachings and guidance that she then transmitted to her students and followers. The information she received was not just philosophical or theoretical, but included practical instructions for spiritual development and detailed descriptions of the higher dimensions of consciousness that awaited those who were ready to perceive them. The masters with whom Blavatsky communicated were described as beings who had once been human, but had evolved beyond the limitations of ordinary existence through lifetimes of spiritual practice and service. They retained individual personalities and characteristics, but their consciousness had expanded to encompass vast ranges of knowledge and wisdom that were normally accessible only to the highest levels of spiritual development. These masters were not distant or aloof figures, but compassionate teachers who worked tirelessly for the spiritual evolution of humanity. They provided guidance and assistance to sincere seekers, but always in ways that respected the individual's free will and natural pace of development. They never forced their teachings on anyone, but made them available to those who were ready to receive them. Blavatsky's communications with the masters revealed that Shambhala was not just a single location, but a network of spiritual centers scattered throughout the world, each one serving a specific function in the overall plan for human evolution. These centers were connected by streams of consciousness that allowed for instantaneous communication and coordination of activities across vast distances. The most intriguing aspect of Blavatsky's revelations was the suggestion that Shambhala existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions, with different aspects of the kingdom being accessible to individuals at different levels of spiritual development. Beginning seekers might perceive it as a physical location hidden in the mountains, while more advanced practitioners would recognize it as a state of consciousness that could be accessed through meditation and spiritual practice. Another fascinating figure in the search for Shambhala was Ferdynand Ossendowski, a Polish explorer and writer who claimed to have encountered clear evidence of the kingdom's existence during his travels through Mongolia and Tibet in the early 20th century. Ossendowski's approach was more that of a traditional explorer, relying on careful observation and documentation rather than mystical experience or spiritual revelation. During his journey through the Gobi Desert, Ossendowski reported meeting numerous individuals who spoke of Shambhala as a current reality rather than an ancient legend. These were not superstitious peasants, but educated lamas, merchants, and government officials who described the kingdom in detailed and consistent terms. They spoke of recent communications with Shambhala's representatives and of ongoing trade relationships that had persisted for centuries. The most remarkable aspect of Ossendowski's investigations was his discovery of what appeared to be a sophisticated communication network that connected various monasteries and spiritual centers throughout Central Asia. This network seemed to operate through methods that defied conventional understanding, allowing for the rapid transmission of information across vast distances without the use of any known technology. Ossendowski documented numerous instances of monks receiving detailed information about events occurring hundreds of miles away, often before any conventional means of communication could have delivered such news. When he questioned these monks about their sources, they consistently referred to their connections with the wisdom holders of Shambhala, describing a system of consciousness-based communication that had been in operation for millennia. The explorer also reported encountering physical evidence of Shambhala's existence in the form of artifacts and technologies that seemed to be far in advance of anything known to conventional science. These included healing devices that could cure ailments through the application of specific vibrations, transportation methods that seemed to involve the manipulation of gravity and magnetic fields, and communication systems that operated through the direct transmission of thought and emotion. One of the most mysterious travelers in search of Shambhala was a figure known only as the White Lama, a European who had supposedly spent decades living in the hidden kingdom and who occasionally emerged to share fragments of its wisdom with the outside world. Very little is known about the White Lama's true identity, but his teachings and descriptions of Shambhala were so detailed and consistent that they convinced many scholars of their authenticity. The White Lama described Shambhala as a place where the normal laws of physics were suspended in favor of higher spiritual principles. He spoke of cities that were built from crystallized sound and light, of transportation systems that operated through the power of focused intention, and of healing methods that worked directly with the life force itself rather than with the physical symptoms of disease. According to the White Lama, the inhabitants of Shambhala had developed technologies that were based on a complete understanding of the relationship between consciousness and matter. They could manipulate physical reality through the power of thought, create matter from pure energy, and travel instantaneously across vast distances by projecting their consciousness into different locations. The most significant aspect of the White Lama's teachings was his description of the educational system that existed in Shambhala. He spoke of universities that had been in continuous operation for thousands of years, preserving and developing knowledge that had been lost to the outside world. These institutions were not just repositories of information, but living centers of wisdom, where students learned through direct experience and practical application. The curriculum in these universities included not just intellectual subjects, but practical training in the manipulation of consciousness and the development of psychic abilities. Students learned to read the Akashic records, to communicate telepathically across vast distances, and to project their consciousness into other dimensions of reality. The most advanced students were trained in the arts of healing, prophecy, and the guidance of human evolution. The White Lama also described the governing system of Shambhala, which was based on a council of enlightened beings who made decisions through consensus and spiritual insight rather than through political maneuvering or the exercise of power. These leaders were not chosen through elections or inheritance, but emerged naturally as their consciousness developed to the point where they could serve the highest good of all beings. The most poignant stories of seekers who ventured forth in search of Shambhala are those of individuals who never returned, leaving behind only fragments of journals and letters that hint at the wonders they may have discovered. These lost travelers have become legends in their own right, their names whispered in the monasteries and trading posts of Central Asia as examples of the ultimate sacrifice that some are willing to make in pursuit of spiritual truth. One such figure was a young British officer named Captain Arthur Wingate, who disappeared in the mountains of Tibet in 1887 while following what he believed to be a map to Shambhala. His last known communication was a letter to his sister, in which he described encountering a group of mysterious figures who had offered to guide him to the hidden kingdom. The letter spoke of his excitement at the prospect of finally achieving his life's dream, but also of his awareness that the journey ahead would likely be his last contact with the conventional world. Another lost traveler was a German botanist named Dr. Klaus Zimmermann, who vanished in the Gobi Desert in 1923 while searching for the legendary gardens of Shambhala. His journal, discovered years later by a nomadic tribe, contained detailed descriptions of plant species that seemed to exist nowhere else on Earth, along with sketches of flowers and trees that appeared to be made of crystallized light rather than ordinary organic matter. The most mysterious of all the lost travelers was a figure known only as the Pilgrim, an individual of unknown nationality and identity who appeared periodically in various locations throughout Central Asia, always asking the same questions about the path to Shambhala and always disappearing before anyone could learn more about his background or intentions. Local legends suggested that the Pilgrim had been searching for the kingdom for centuries, sustained by spiritual practices that allowed him to transcend the normal limitations of human existence. The stories of these lost travelers serve as both inspiration and warning for those who would follow in their footsteps. They remind us that the search for ultimate truth is not a casual undertaking, but a commitment that may require the sacrifice of everything we hold dear in the conventional world. Yet they also suggest that for those who are truly prepared, the rewards of such a quest may be beyond anything that ordinary existence can offer. The trails left by these seekers continue to inspire new generations of explorers, both physical and spiritual, who are drawn to the mystery of Shambhala and the promise of transcendence that it represents. In the maps they drew, the artifacts they collected, and the stories they left behind, we find clues to the nature of the quest itself and guidance for our own journeys toward the hidden kingdom. The modern world, with its emphasis on material achievement and rational understanding, might seem to have little place for such romantic quests and mystical adventures. Yet the stories of these lost travelers remind us that the human spirit has always been drawn to mysteries that transcend the boundaries of ordinary experience, and that the search for Shambhala continues in new forms even today. In the accounts of these brave souls who ventured into the unknown, we find not just historical curiosities, but timeless wisdom about the nature of spiritual seeking and the courage required to pursue truth regardless of the cost. Their journeys, whether successful or not, have left behind traces of inspiration that continue to guide and encourage all who hear the call of the legendary kingdom. The paths they blazed through the mountains and deserts of Central Asia were not just physical routes, but spiritual highways that remain open to those who are ready to follow them. In their footsteps, we find our own way forward, guided by their example and sustained by their courage, as we continue the eternal human quest for the kingdom that exists beyond the horizons of ordinary perception. What architectural marvels could exist in a realm where consciousness itself shapes matter, where the very buildings pulse with life and respond to the thoughts of their inhabitants? How might the structures of Shambhala transcend the limitations of ordinary construction, becoming living expressions of harmony between spirit and substance? Could it be that the legendary crystal cities and golden palaces represent not just physical spaces, but manifestations of perfected consciousness itself? In the ancient texts that describe Shambhala, the kingdom's architecture is portrayed as something far beyond human imagination, structures that seem to exist at the intersection of matter and light, form and consciousness. These are not buildings in the conventional sense, but living expressions of spiritual energy constructed from materials that respond to the inner state of those who behold them. The crystal cities of Shambhala are described as being simultaneously solid and translucent, their walls and towers appearing to be carved from single massive gems that capture and reflect light in ways that create constantly shifting patterns of rainbow brilliance. The capital city of Kalapa stands at the heart of this architectural wonder, its central palace rising from the earth like a crystalline mountain that seems to have been grown rather than built. The palace is described as being constructed from what the texts call solidified light, a substance that appears to be ordinary crystal to those who view it with mundane consciousness, but reveals its true nature as concentrated spiritual energy to those whose perception has been refined through years of meditation and spiritual practice. The foundations of this magnificent structure are said to extend deep into the earth, not merely resting on the ground, but growing from it like the roots of some cosmic tree. These foundations are described as being made of a golden substance that is not ordinary metal, but rather condensed solar energy, capturing and storing the life-giving power of the sun itself. The golden foundations pulse with a gentle rhythm that matches the heartbeat of the planet, creating a harmonic resonance that extends throughout the entire structure and beyond. The process by which these foundations were created is described in the most esoteric texts as a collaboration between the consciousness of the Kalki kings and the living intelligence of the earth itself. Over countless centuries, the rulers of Shambhala have meditated in communion with the planetary consciousness, gradually coaxing the earth to produce these golden root-like structures that serve as both physical support and spiritual anchor for the kingdom's architecture. The walls of the palace rise in spiraling curves that seem to defy the normal laws of gravity and structural engineering. Instead of straight lines and right angles, the architecture follows the natural patterns found in seashells, flowers, and galaxies, creating a sense of organic growth and natural harmony. The walls themselves are described as being neither completely solid nor completely transparent, but existing in a state of dynamic equilibrium between these two conditions. These walls are said to be composed of millions of individual crystal cells, each one a perfect geometric form that resonates with specific frequencies of light and sound. The cells are arranged in patterns that mirror the structure of living organisms, with each cell contributing to the overall stability and function of the whole while maintaining its own unique characteristics. The walls can become more solid or more transparent based on the needs of the moment, providing privacy when required or opening up to create vast, interconnected spaces for community gatherings. The surface of these walls contains intricate patterns that seem to shift and change depending on the viewer's state of consciousness and spiritual development. To those who approach with pure hearts and clear minds, the walls reveal elaborate mandalas and sacred geometries that serve as visual teachings, conveying profound spiritual truths through their mathematical precision and aesthetic beauty. To those who approach with clouded consciousness or impure motivations, the walls appear to be blank, or may even become completely opaque, preventing entry to the inner chambers. The patterns that appear on the walls are not merely decorative but serve as a kind of spiritual curriculum, with different levels of teaching being revealed as the observer's consciousness develops. Beginning students might see simple geometric forms and basic symbolic representations, while more advanced practitioners could perceive complex multidimensional mandalas that contain entire libraries of spiritual knowledge encoded in their intricate designs. The towers of the palace spiral upward in golden helixes that seem to pierce the very fabric of space and time, reaching toward dimensions that exist beyond ordinary perception. These towers are not merely decorative but serve as antennas or receivers that connect the palace to the cosmic energies that flow throughout the universe. Each tower is precisely calibrated to receive specific frequencies of spiritual energy, collecting and focusing these forces for the benefit of the palace's inhabitants. The construction of these towers represents one of the most sophisticated achievements of Shambhala's spiritual technology. Each tower is grown from a single seed crystal that has been programmed with specific vibrational patterns designed to resonate with particular aspects of cosmic consciousness. As the tower grows, it maintains perfect harmonic relationships with all the other towers in the complex, creating a symphony of crystalline structures that work together to maintain the spiritual atmosphere of the entire kingdom. The most remarkable feature of the palace is its ability to adapt and respond to the needs of its occupants. The rooms and chambers are not fixed spaces but fluid environments that can expand, contract, or reconfigure themselves based on the activities taking place within them. A meditation chamber might become vast and cathedral-like when its occupant enters deep states of contemplation, while a study might become intimate and cozy when used for detailed research or writing. This adaptability is achieved through what the texts describe as conscious architecture, building materials that retain a form of awareness and can respond to the mental and emotional states of those who inhabit them. The walls, floors, and ceilings of the palace are infused with a kind of crystalline consciousness that allows them to perceive the needs of their occupants and adjust accordingly. The lighting within the palace comes not from external sources but from the walls and furnishings themselves, which seem to generate their own luminous glow. This light is not harsh or artificial, but warm and alive, seeming to nourish both the body and the spirit of those who bask in its radiance. The quality of the light changes throughout the day and seasons, creating natural rhythms that support the inhabitants' physical and spiritual well-being. The source of this luminous energy is described as being the accumulated spiritual merit and wisdom of all those who have dwelt in the palace throughout the ages. Each act of kindness, each moment of enlightenment, each prayer and meditation contributes to the palace's store of spiritual energy, which is then radiated back into the environment as healing and nourishing light. The furnishings within the palace are described as being carved from single pieces of precious stone, but these stones are not ordinary gems, but crystallized thoughts and emotions of the enlightened beings who have dwelt in Shambhala throughout the ages. Each piece of furniture carries within it the accumulated wisdom and compassion of those who have used it, creating an environment where every object serves as a teacher and guide for spiritual development. The process of creating these furnishings is described as a form of spiritual alchemy, where the pure thoughts and emotions of enlightened beings are gradually condensed and crystallized into physical form. A chair might be formed from the crystallized patience of a meditation master, while a table could be constructed from the solidified generosity of a bodhisattva who had dedicated their life to serving others. The windows of the palace are particularly extraordinary, appearing to be made of crystallized air that allows perfect visibility while providing complete protection from the elements. These windows do not merely look out onto the physical landscape but can be adjusted to reveal different dimensions of reality, allowing their viewers to observe the subtle energies that flow through the natural world, or to gaze into distant times and places. The technology behind these miraculous windows is based on the principle that consciousness can be used to manipulate the vibrational frequency of matter. By adjusting the frequency of the crystallized air, the windows can be tuned to reveal different aspects of reality, from the dense physical world to the subtle realms of thought and emotion that exist beyond ordinary perception. The gardens surrounding the palace are equally miraculous, containing plants and flowers that seem to exist in a state of perpetual bloom and perfect health. These gardens are not maintained through ordinary horticultural methods but through the focused attention and loving care of the palace's inhabitants, whose conscious participation in the garden's well-being creates a symbiotic relationship between human consciousness and plant life. The relationship between the gardeners and their plants is described as being one of true partnership, with the plants responding to the mental and emotional states of their caretakers by adjusting their growth, coloration, and flowering patterns. A gardener who approaches their work with deep love and reverence might find their plants growing with unusual vigor and beauty, while someone who tends the garden with distraction or negativity might find their plants struggling to thrive. The trees in these gardens are described as being made of crystallized wood that retains all the properties of living timber while possessing the clarity and permanence of precious stones. The fruits that grow on these trees are not ordinary food, but concentrated life force that can sustain the body for extended periods while simultaneously nourishing the soul. The flowers bloom in colors that have no names in human language, their petals seeming to be composed of liquid light that flows and shifts in response to the emotions and thoughts of those who observe them. The creation of these crystallized trees represents one of the most profound achievements of Shambhala's spiritual science. The process begins with ordinary saplings that are gradually transformed through sustained meditation and spiritual practice. The tree's cellular structure is slowly modified through the application of specific frequencies of consciousness, eventually resulting in a hybrid organism that exists simultaneously in the physical and spiritual realms. The fountains that flow throughout the gardens are fed by springs that seem to emerge from the very heart of the earth, their waters carrying minerals and energies that have been concentrated and purified through eons of geological and spiritual processes. These waters are said to have healing properties that can cure any ailment. but their most remarkable quality is their ability to reflect the true nature of anyone who gazes into them, serving as mirrors for spiritual self-examination and growth. The pathways that wind through the gardens are paved with stones that have been polished to mirror-like smoothness, but these stones are not ordinary rock, but crystallized intentions and prayers of the countless pilgrims who have walked these paths throughout the centuries. Each step taken on these pathways adds to their accumulated spiritual power, creating a feedback loop that supports and amplifies the spiritual development of future travelers. Beyond the central palace, the city of Kalapa extends in all directions, its districts and neighborhoods organized according to principles of sacred geometry and spiritual harmony. The residential areas are composed of smaller versions of the palace architecture, each dwelling being perfectly suited to the needs and spiritual development of its inhabitants. The houses seem to grow and evolve as their occupants progress in their spiritual journey, adding new rooms and features as expanded consciousness requires expanded living space. The planning of the city itself follows a complex mandala pattern, with each district corresponding to a specific aspect of spiritual development and human experience. The sectors are arranged in concentric circles around the central palace, with the innermost circles housing the most advanced spiritual practitioners and the outer circles providing homes for those who are still developing their consciousness. The commercial areas of the city are unlike anything found in ordinary civilization, as the inhabitants of Shambhala have transcended the need for conventional economic exchange. Instead of shops and markets, there are centers of creativity and learning where inhabitants share their skills, knowledge, and artistic creations freely with anyone who can benefit from them. These centers are housed in buildings that seem to pulse with creative energy, their walls and ceilings serving as canvases for ever-changing displays of light and color that reflect the creative activities taking place within. The architecture of these creative centers is specifically designed to enhance and amplify the creative capacities of their users. The walls are embedded with crystals that resonate with the frequencies associated with artistic inspiration, while the floors are constructed from materials that help ground and stabilize the often chaotic energies of the creative process. The educational institutions of Kalapa are perhaps the most impressive of all the city's structures, vast complexes that seem to exist partially in the physical world and partially in higher dimensions of consciousness. These universities are described as being built from crystallized knowledge itself, their libraries containing not books but living repositories of wisdom that can communicate directly with the minds of serious students. The architecture of these educational buildings is based on the principle that physical space can be used to enhance and facilitate learning and spiritual development. The buildings are designed as three-dimensional mandalas, with each room and corridor contributing to an overall pattern that helps focus and direct the consciousness of students and teachers. The lecture halls in these institutions are designed to amplify and focus the consciousness of both teachers and students, creating an environment where learning takes place not just through the transmission of information but through direct spiritual communion. The walls of these halls are covered with what appear to be crystal formations, but these are actually solidified thoughts and insights of the great teachers who have taught in these spaces throughout the ages. The laboratories and research facilities in Shambhala's universities are equipped with instruments that seem to be grown rather than manufactured, crystalline devices that can measure and manipulate the subtle energies that underlie all physical phenomena. These instruments are operated not through mechanical controls, but through the focused intention and spiritual development of their users, making them accessible only to those who have achieved sufficient mastery over their own consciousness. The transportation systems that connect different parts of the city are as remarkable as the buildings themselves, consisting of streams of crystallized energy that can carry passengers instantaneously from one location to another. These transportation networks are not built on the surface of the ground, but flow through the crystalline matrix that underlies the entire city, creating a three-dimensional web of movement that allows for rapid and efficient travel without any environmental impact. The public spaces of Kalapa are designed to facilitate community gathering and spiritual practice, with plazas and courtyards that seem to naturally draw people together in harmonious groups. These spaces are paved with stones that have been programmed with specific vibrational frequencies that promote peace, understanding, and spiritual growth among all who enter them. The fountains and water features in these spaces create sound patterns that serve as natural mantras, their rhythmic flow inducing meditative states in anyone who listens to them. The temples and spiritual centers scattered throughout the city are perhaps the most magnificent of all Shambhala's structures, each one designed to facilitate specific types of spiritual practice and realization. These temples are not built from ordinary materials, but from crystallized devotion and faith, their very substance created from the accumulated prayers and aspirations of countless seekers throughout the ages. The most sacred of these temples is the central shrine where the Kalki king conducts the most important ceremonies and rituals of the kingdom. This temple is described as being constructed from a single massive crystal that seems to contain within it the entire history and future of human spiritual evolution. The crystal pulses with a gentle light that synchronizes with the heartbeats of all who enter, creating a sense of unity and communion that transcends individual identity. The acoustic properties of this temple are extraordinary, with every whisper being amplified and clarified, while harsh or negative sounds are automatically muted or transformed into harmonious tones. The temple serves as a kind of spiritual amplifier, magnifying the power of prayers and meditations while filtering out any vibrations that might interfere with the sacred work being conducted within. The healing centers of Shambhala represent another aspect of the kingdom's miraculous architecture, buildings that seem to diagnose and treat ailments through their very structure and design. These centers are constructed from crystals that have been specifically programmed to resonate with the natural healing frequencies of the human body, creating environments where recovery and regeneration happen automatically simply by being present in the space. The walls of these healing centers are covered with geometric patterns that seem to shift and change based on the needs of the patients within, creating customized healing environments that address each individual's specific requirements. The floors are made of stones that generate gentle warmth and magnetic fields that support the body's natural healing processes, while the ceilings are designed to collect and focus cosmic energies that promote spiritual as well as physical well-being. The most remarkable aspect of Shambhala's architecture is its living quality, the way that every structure seems to be conscious and responsive to the needs of its inhabitants. The buildings are not just shelters or functional spaces, but partners in the spiritual journey, actively supporting and facilitating the growth and development of all who dwell within them. They represent the ultimate integration of consciousness and matter, showing what becomes possible when human creativity is guided by spiritual wisdom and unlimited by material constraints. The crystal cities and golden palaces of Shambhala thus stand as monuments to the potential that lies dormant within human consciousness, architectural achievements that become possible when the barriers between mind and matter are dissolved through spiritual realization. They represent not just the pinnacle of building technology, but the natural expression of consciousness that has learned to work in harmony with the fundamental forces of creation itself. In these miraculous structures, we see reflected the ultimate destiny of human civilization, the possibility of creating environments that support and nurture the highest potentials of consciousness, while providing for all the practical needs of physical existence. The architecture of Shambhala serves as both inspiration and blueprint for what human creativity might achieve when guided by wisdom, compassion, and a deep understanding of the true nature of reality. The golden palaces stand eternal, their crystalline walls reflecting not just light, but the infinite possibilities that await human consciousness when it learns to build, not just with stone and metal, but with the very substance of dreams made manifest through spiritual mastery. In the gentle glow of their living walls, in the harmonious proportions of their sacred geometry, in the responsive intelligence of their conscious architecture, we glimpse the future of human civilization and the ultimate flowering of consciousness itself. Who is the mysterious sovereign who rules over the kingdom of Shambhala, and what powers does he possess that set him apart from all other earthly rulers? How do the ancient prophecies describe his ultimate emergence into the world, and what role will he play in the final transformation of human consciousness? Could it be that the Kalki King represents not just a future savior, but the highest potential that exists within every human soul? In the deepest chambers of Tibetan monasteries, where the most sacred texts are kept hidden from all but the most advanced practitioners, there are scrolls that speak of a being whose very existence transcends the ordinary boundaries of human understanding. This is the Kalki King, the final ruler of Shambhala, whose appearance in the world will signal the dawning of a new age of spiritual enlightenment and the end of the current cycle of ignorance and suffering. The Kalki King is described not as an ordinary human being who happens to possess extraordinary powers, but as a divine incarnation whose consciousness encompasses the entire spectrum of existence from the grossest material realm to the most refined spiritual dimensions. His body, while appearing human to those who behold him, is said to be composed of a substance that exists simultaneously in multiple dimensions, allowing him to manifest in the physical world while remaining anchored in the higher realms of pure consciousness. The ancient texts speak of his eyes as containing the depth of eternity itself, reflecting back to those who meet his gaze the truth of their own divine nature. These are not ordinary eyes that merely perceive the surface appearances of things, but organs of cosmic vision that can penetrate through all illusions and see directly into the heart of reality. To look into the eyes of the Kalki King is said to be like gazing into the very source of creation itself, an experience that can instantly transform the consciousness of anyone who is ready to receive such a revelation. His voice carries the power of creation itself, each word he speaks resonating through multiple dimensions of reality and producing effects that extend far beyond the immediate context of his communication. When the Kalki King speaks, the very atoms of matter respond to his words, rearranging themselves according to his will. The weather patterns shift to reflect his moods. The earth itself trembles with joy at his presence, and the hearts of all living beings are touched by the vibrations of his speech. The crown that adorns his head is not made of ordinary gold and jewels, but is composed of crystallized wisdom and compassion, the accumulated spiritual achievements of all the enlightened beings who have ever lived. This crown is said to contain within its structure the entire history of human spiritual evolution, from the first stirrings of consciousness in primitive humanity to the ultimate destiny of the race as fully realized divine beings. The throne upon which the Kalki King sits is described as being carved from a single, massive crystal that serves as a focal point for the spiritual energies of the entire kingdom. This crystal throne is not merely a seat of power, but a living instrument that amplifies and directs the king's consciousness, allowing him to remain in constant communion with every aspect of existence throughout the universe. The robes that clothe the Kalki King are woven from threads of pure light, their colors shifting and changing to reflect the various aspects of his divine nature. These garments are not physical clothing in the ordinary sense, but visible manifestations of his spiritual aura, the radiance of his enlightened consciousness made visible to those who have developed the capacity to perceive such subtle phenomena. The most remarkable aspect of the Kalki King's nature is his ability to exist simultaneously in multiple locations and dimensions, appearing wherever his presence is needed while never leaving his throne in the heart of Shambhala. This omnipresence is not achieved through supernatural magic, but through the natural result of a consciousness that has transcended the limitations of individual identity and merged with the universal awareness that underlies all existence. The prophecies concerning the Kalki King's emergence into the world speak of a time when humanity will have reached the very depths of spiritual darkness, when materialism and ignorance will have become so pervasive that the very survival of wisdom and compassion will be threatened. It is at this critical moment that the king will emerge from his hidden kingdom, not as a conqueror seeking to dominate through force, but as a teacher and guide, whose very presence will awaken the dormant spiritual potential that lies sleeping within every human heart. The signs that will herald the approach of this momentous event are described in great detail in the ancient texts. The first sign will be the appearance of teachers and spiritual guides throughout the world, individuals who carry within them fragments of the Kalki King's consciousness and who prepare the way for his ultimate manifestation. These forerunners will not necessarily be recognized as having any connection to Shambhala, but they will share certain characteristics that mark them as authentic representatives of the kingdom's wisdom. The second sign will be the development of technologies that allow for instantaneous communication across vast distances, enabling the rapid spread of ideas and the creation of a global network of consciousness that parallels the spiritual communication systems that have always existed in Shambhala. These technologies will serve as external manifestations of the telepathic abilities that the inhabitants of the hidden kingdom have always possessed. The third sign will be the emergence of a generation of young people who seem to possess an intuitive understanding of spiritual truths that previous generations had to struggle for lifetimes to achieve. These young souls will be described as having an almost supernatural ability to perceive the unity that underlies all apparent diversity, and they will serve as bridges between the old world of separation and conflict and the new world of harmony and cooperation. The fourth sign will be the occurrence of natural phenomena that seem to defy conventional scientific explanation, events that point to the existence of dimensions of reality that orthodox science has not yet recognized. These phenomena will serve as reminders that the material world is not the only realm of existence, and they will prepare humanity for the revelation of the spiritual dimensions that have always been present but hidden from ordinary perception. The fifth and final sign will be the appearance of conflicts and challenges that seem to threaten the very survival of human civilization, crises that force humanity to choose between the path of continued ignorance and the path of spiritual awakening. These challenges will serve as the final test that determines whether humanity is ready for the revelation of the Kalki King and the establishment of the new age of enlightenment. The prophecies describe the Kalki King's emergence as occurring not through a single dramatic event, but through a gradual process of manifestation that unfolds over several decades. Initially, his influence will be felt as a subtle shift in the consciousness of sensitive individuals throughout the world, a growing awareness of possibilities that had previously seemed impossible. Artists will begin to create works that reflect higher spiritual truths. Scientists will make discoveries that bridge the gap between matter and consciousness, and ordinary people will begin to experience spontaneous moments of enlightenment and spiritual insight. As this process continues, the Kalki King will begin to manifest more directly in the physical world, appearing to groups of prepared individuals who have developed the capacity to perceive his presence. These initial manifestations will not be public events, but private encounters that serve to establish a network of consciousness that can support his more complete emergence into the world. The final phase of his manifestation will be marked by his appearance before the entire world, not as a single physical being, but as a presence that can be perceived simultaneously by all humanity. This will not be a conventional arrival, but a revelation that occurs within the consciousness of every individual. As the barriers between the inner and outer worlds dissolve and the true nature of reality becomes apparent to all, the transformation that will accompany the Kalki King's emergence is described as being far more profound than any political or social revolution that has ever occurred in human history. It will be a fundamental shift in the very nature of human consciousness, an evolutionary leap that will enable humanity to transcend the limitations that have bound it for millennia and to take its place as a fully conscious participant in the cosmic community of enlightened beings. The new age that will dawn with the Kalki King's revelation will be characterized by the complete elimination of war, poverty, and suffering, not through external reforms or governmental programs, but through the natural result of a humanity that has awakened to its true divine nature. When every individual recognizes their fundamental unity with all existence, the causes of conflict and competition will simply disappear, replaced by a natural impulse toward cooperation and mutual support. The technologies that will emerge in this new age will be based on principles that integrate matter and consciousness, allowing for the creation of tools and systems that respond directly to human intention and serve the highest good of all beings. These will not be mechanical devices in the conventional sense, but living instruments that grow and evolve along with the consciousness of their users. The educational systems of the New Age will be modeled on the universities of Shambhala, institutions where learning occurs through direct spiritual communion rather than through the mere transmission of information. Students will develop not just intellectual understanding, but the capacity to perceive truth directly, to heal through the power of compassion, and to create through the focused application of conscious intention. The governance of the New Age will be based on the principles that have always operated in Shambhala, with decisions being made through consensus and spiritual insight rather than through political maneuvering or the exercise of power. Leaders will emerge naturally as their consciousness develops to the point where they can serve the highest good of all beings, and they will be supported by a population that has awakened to its own divine nature. The prophecies also speak of the role that the current inhabitants of Shambhala will play in this great transformation. As the Kalki king emerges into the world, the kingdom itself will become less hidden, with its citizens taking on increasingly public roles as teachers, healers, and guides for the awakening humanity. The knowledge and wisdom that have been preserved in the hidden kingdom for millennia will be shared freely with all who are ready to receive it. The process of transformation will not be uniform across all regions and populations, with some areas and groups awakening more quickly than others. The inhabitants of Shambhala will work to ensure that the transition occurs as smoothly as possible, providing support and guidance to those who are struggling to adapt to the new realities that are emerging. The most profound aspect of the Kalki King's mission is his role as a mirror for humanity's own potential. His appearance in the world will serve as a reminder that the powers and abilities he demonstrates are not unique to him, but represent the natural birthright of every human soul. The transformation he will catalyze is not something that will be imposed from outside, but something that will be awakened from within, as individuals recognize and claim their own divine nature. The teachings that the Kalki King will share with the world will not be new doctrines or belief systems, but reminders of truths that have always been known but forgotten. His presence will serve as a catalyst that helps humanity remember what it has always known deep in its heart, that separation is an illusion, that love is the fundamental force of the universe, and that every individual has the capacity to transcend the limitations of ordinary consciousness and participate directly in the divine life of the cosmos. The prophecies make it clear that the time of the Kalki King's emergence is not a distant future event, but something that is already beginning to unfold in the present moment. The signs that were foretold in the ancient texts are already visible to those who know how to interpret them, and the preliminary phases of his manifestation are already underway. The most important preparation that individuals can make for this momentous event is not to seek for external signs or to wait passively for the king's arrival, but to begin the process of inner transformation that will make them capable of recognizing and receiving his presence when it manifests. This preparation involves the cultivation of the same qualities that characterize the inhabitants of Shambhala: perfect compassion, unwavering faith, infinite patience, selfless generosity, impeccable moral conduct, one-pointed concentration, and direct spiritual insight. The prophecies of the Kalki King thus serve not just as predictions of future events, but as invitations to participate in the great work of human transformation that is already beginning to unfold. Every individual who dedicates themselves to the path of spiritual development becomes a part of the network of consciousness that will support the King's emergence and help to manifest the new age of enlightenment. In the quiet moments of meditation, in the sudden flashes of insight that illuminate the true nature of reality, in the spontaneous outpourings of compassion that connect us to all beings, we can already feel the presence of the Kalki King beginning to stir within our own consciousness. For in the end, the greatest prophecy is not that he will come from outside to save us, but that he will awaken from within to reveal what we have always been. Divine beings playing at being human, forever loved and forever free, forever one with the infinite consciousness that is the source and substance of all existence. The golden throne awaits, not in some distant kingdom, but in the heart of every seeker who has the courage to claim their divine birthright and step forward into the light of their own true nature. The Kalki King is coming, and his arrival will be nothing less than humanity's recognition of its own infinite potential finally coming home to itself. What profound secrets of existence are preserved within the sacred libraries of Shambhala, and how do these teachings differ from the spiritual knowledge available in the outer world? Could it be that the wisdom maintained in this hidden kingdom represents not just advanced philosophical understanding, but practical methods for transcending the very limitations of human consciousness itself? What mysteries of time, space, and the nature of reality await those who are prepared to receive the deepest teachings of the enlightened realm? Within the crystalline walls of Shambhala's most sacred sanctuaries, there exists a repository of knowledge so vast and profound that it encompasses not merely the spiritual wisdom of human civilization, but the accumulated understanding of countless enlightened beings from throughout the cosmos. This is not knowledge that can be contained in ordinary books or transmitted through conventional teaching methods, but living wisdom that exists as streams of pure consciousness, accessible only to those who have developed the capacity to merge their awareness with the infinite intelligence that underlies all existence. The foundation of all teaching in Shambhala rests upon what the inhabitants call the primordial understanding, the direct recognition that consciousness itself is the fundamental substance of reality, and that what we perceive as the material world is merely one particular expression of this infinite creative potential. This understanding is not presented as a philosophical theory to be debated or analyzed, but as a living truth to be directly experienced and embodied in every moment of existence. The process of receiving these teachings begins with what the masters of Shambhala call the opening of the inner eye, a transformation of perception that allows the student to perceive the subtle energies and hidden dimensions that exist parallel to ordinary reality. This opening is not achieved through intellectual study or external techniques, but through a gradual purification of consciousness that dissolves the barriers between the individual mind and the universal awareness that is the source of all knowledge. The first level of teaching that becomes available to those who have achieved this opening concerns the true nature of time itself. In the outer world, time is perceived as a linear progression from past to future, with each moment following inevitably from the one before. But in Shambhala, time is understood to be a multidimensional matrix in which all possibilities exist simultaneously, and in which consciousness can navigate freely between different temporal coordinates. The masters teach that what we call the past is not something that has already happened and is therefore fixed and unchangeable, but rather a particular configuration of consciousness that continues to exist in the eternal now, and can be accessed and even modified through the proper application of spiritual techniques. Similarly, the future is not a distant destination toward which we are moving, but a realm of infinite potential that exists in the present moment and can be consciously shaped through focused intention and clear vision. The practical implications of this understanding are profound. Students learn to access what the teachers call the Akashic records, not as external archives of historical information, but as aspects of their own expanded consciousness that contain the complete history of all existence. Through deep meditation and spiritual practice, they develop the ability to perceive past events with perfect clarity, to understand the karmic patterns that shape present circumstances, and to glimpse the multiple future possibilities that branch out from every moment of choice. The second level of teaching concerns the nature of space and the multidimensional structure of reality. While the outer world recognizes only 3 dimensions of space plus time, the masters of Shambhala work with a model of reality that includes numerous additional dimensions, each one representing a different aspect of consciousness and corresponding to specific levels of spiritual development. These dimensions are not abstract mathematical concepts, but living realms that can be directly experienced and explored by those who have developed the appropriate perceptual capabilities. The teachings describe how consciousness can learn to project itself into these higher dimensions, experiencing forms of existence that transcend the limitations of physical embodiment while remaining anchored in the wisdom and compassion that characterize the most advanced spiritual development. The navigation of these dimensional realms requires not just intellectual understanding, but the development of what the teachers call multidimensional awareness, the ability to maintain coherent consciousness across multiple levels of reality simultaneously. This is achieved through years of disciplined meditation practice, during which the student learns to expand their awareness gradually, adding new dimensions of perception while maintaining stability and clarity in their core consciousness. The third level of teaching focuses on the manipulation of what the masters call conscious energy, the fundamental force that underlies all manifestation and that can be directed through the power of enlightened intention. This energy is not separate from consciousness, but is consciousness itself in its dynamic, creative aspect, the divine power through which thoughts become things and intentions become reality. Students at this level learn to work with this energy directly, developing the ability to heal through the transmission of pure life force, to create matter through the focused application of spiritual will, and to transform the very structure of reality through the power of enlightened consciousness. These are not supernatural abilities, but natural expressions of human potential that become available when the artificial limitations of ordinary thinking are transcended. The process of learning to work with conscious energy begins with the development of what the teachers call energetic sensitivity, the ability to perceive and work with the subtle energy fields that surround and interpenetrate all living beings. Students learn to see the auras that surround physical bodies, to feel the electromagnetic fields generated by thoughts and emotions, and to sense the flow of life force through the various energy centers or chakras that exist within the human energy system. As this sensitivity develops, students begin to learn the arts of energetic healing, learning to diagnose illness and imbalance through direct perception of the patient's energy field, and to restore health through the transmission of healing energy and the removal of energetic blockages. This healing work is not limited to physical ailments, but extends to emotional and psychological healing, and ultimately to the transformation of consciousness itself. The fourth level of teaching concerns the development of what the masters call telepathic communion, the ability to communicate directly from mind to mind without the need for words or physical signals. This ability is considered essential for citizenship in Shambhala, as it allows for the kind of immediate and complete understanding that makes possible the perfect harmony that characterizes life in the hidden kingdom. The development of telepathic abilities begins with the recognition that all consciousness is ultimately one, and that the apparent separation between individual minds is merely a temporary illusion created by identification with the physical body and the personal ego. As students learn to transcend these limitations, they discover that they can access the thoughts and feelings of others as easily as they can access their own, and that communication can occur at the speed of thought across any distance. The teaching of telepathic communion is not limited to human communication, but extends to communication with all forms of consciousness, including animals, plants, and even the consciousness that exists within apparently inanimate objects. Advanced students learn to commune with the spirits of mountains and rivers, to receive wisdom from the consciousness of crystals and stones, and to participate in the vast network of planetary consciousness that connects all life on Earth. The fifth level of teaching focuses on the development of what the masters call manifestation mastery, the ability to create physical reality through the power of consciousness alone. This is perhaps the most advanced of all the teachings available in Shambhala, as it requires not just intellectual understanding, but the complete purification of consciousness and the absolute alignment of personal will with divine will. Students at this level learn that the physical world is not a solid, fixed reality, but a fluid expression of consciousness that can be modified and transformed through the proper application of spiritual principles. They discover that matter is simply energy in a particular state of vibration, and that by changing the vibrational frequency of their consciousness, they can change the vibrational frequency of matter itself. The practical applications of this understanding are limitless. Advanced practitioners learn to transmute base metals into gold, to create food from the basic elements of earth and air, to heal the most severe illnesses through the power of focused intention, and to extend their physical lives indefinitely through the conscious direction of the life force. These abilities are not used for personal gain or aggrandizement, but only in service of the highest good of all beings. The sixth level of teaching concerns the development of what the masters call dimensional travel, the ability to project consciousness into other realms of existence and to travel instantly across vast distances through the power of focused intention. This ability is essential for the advanced students of Shambhala, as it allows them to maintain contact with spiritual centers throughout the universe and to participate in the cosmic community of enlightened beings. The process of learning dimensional travel begins with the recognition that consciousness is not limited by the boundaries of the physical body, but can extend itself into any realm of existence through the power of focused attention and spiritual will. Students learn to project their consciousness first into the astral realms that exist parallel to physical reality, then into the mental realms where thoughts take on concrete form, and finally into the causal realms where the fundamental patterns of manifestation are established. As students develop proficiency in dimensional travel, they discover that they can visit other planets and star systems, communicate with advanced civilizations throughout the galaxy, and participate in the councils of enlightened beings who guide the spiritual evolution of consciousness throughout the universe. These experiences are not fantasies or hallucinations, but genuine contacts with other dimensions of reality that exist beyond the range of ordinary perception. The seventh level of teaching focuses on the development of what the masters call cosmic consciousness, the ability to merge individual awareness with the infinite consciousness that is the source and substance of all existence. This is the ultimate goal of all spiritual practice in Shambhala, as it represents the complete transcendence of the limitations that bind ordinary consciousness and the full realization of one's true nature as a divine being. The achievement of cosmic consciousness is not a one-time event, but a gradual process of expansion that continues throughout eternity. Students learn to identify less and less with their individual personality, and more with the universal consciousness that expresses itself through all forms of life. As this identification deepens, they discover that they are not separate beings trying to connect with the divine, but expressions of the divine itself, temporarily focused in individual form for the purpose of experiencing and serving the cosmic plan. The teachings of Shambhala also include extensive instruction in what the masters call karmic science, the understanding of the precise laws that govern the relationship between actions and their consequences across multiple lifetimes and dimensions of existence. This knowledge is essential for anyone who wishes to accelerate their spiritual development, as it allows them to understand exactly what actions will produce what results and to plan their spiritual practice accordingly. Students learn that karma is not a system of punishment and reward, but a precise mechanism for spiritual education, designed to provide each consciousness with exactly the experiences it needs for its continued growth and development. They discover that every circumstance, every relationship, every challenge and opportunity is perfectly designed to facilitate the next stage of their spiritual evolution, and that by understanding and working with karmic law, they can accelerate their progress immeasurably. The karmic teachings include detailed instruction in the art of what the masters call conscious dying, the ability to maintain full awareness and control during the transition from physical embodiment to the subtle realms that exist beyond death. Students learn that death is not the end of existence, but simply a change of focus, and that by maintaining consciousness during the dying process, they can ensure that their transition is smooth and their continued development uninterrupted. The process of conscious dying begins with the recognition that consciousness is not produced by the brain, but uses the brain as a temporary vehicle for interaction with the physical world. As the physical body begins to fail, the consciousness can learn to withdraw from its physical vehicle gradually and purposefully, maintaining full awareness as it transitions to the subtle body that will serve as its vehicle in the afterlife realms. advanced students learn not only to die consciously, but to choose their next incarnation purposefully, selecting parents, circumstances, and life experiences that will provide the optimal conditions for their continued spiritual development. This process of conscious rebirth is one of the most closely guarded secrets of Shambhala, as it represents the ultimate mastery over the cycle of death and rebirth that binds ordinary consciousness. The teachings of Shambhala also include what the masters call planetary healing, the understanding of how individual consciousness can contribute to the healing and transformation of the earth itself. Students learn that the planet is not merely a physical object, but a living, conscious being with its own spiritual development and evolutionary destiny, and that human consciousness plays a crucial role in facilitating this planetary evolution. The process of planetary healing begins with the recognition that all life on Earth is interconnected and interdependent, and that the health and well-being of the planet is directly related to the consciousness and spiritual development of its inhabitants. Students learn to extend their healing abilities beyond individual beings to encompass entire ecosystems, weather patterns, and geological processes, working to restore balance and harmony to the Earth's energy systems. This work is not limited to environmental healing, but includes the transformation of human consciousness itself, as students learn to radiate healing energy into the collective unconscious of humanity, helping to dissolve the patterns of fear, anger, and separation that create conflict and suffering in the world. The ultimate goal of planetary healing is the transformation of Earth itself into a sacred planet where all life can flourish in harmony and peace. The most advanced teachings of Shambhala concern what the masters call cosmic service, the understanding of how individual consciousness can contribute to the spiritual evolution of the entire universe. Students learn that their personal spiritual development is not an end in itself, but a preparation for service to the cosmic plan, and that their ultimate destiny is to become conscious participants in the divine intelligence that guides the evolution of all existence. This service takes many forms, from the simple act of maintaining a clear and loving consciousness that contributes to the overall spiritual atmosphere of the universe, to the more complex work of serving as channels for divine energy and wisdom, to the ultimate responsibility of becoming teachers and guides for other beings who are seeking to awaken to their true nature. The preparation for cosmic service requires not just the development of spiritual abilities, but the complete purification of motivation, ensuring that all actions are motivated by love and compassion rather than personal desire or ego gratification. Students learn to surrender their individual will completely to the divine will, becoming perfect instruments for the expression of cosmic consciousness in the world. The teachings conclude with the understanding that all of these abilities and realizations are not special attainments reserved for a chosen few, but represent the natural birthright of every conscious being in the universe. The purpose of the teachings is not to create a spiritual elite, but to help all beings remember their true nature and claim their divine inheritance. In the end, the greatest teaching of Shambhala is that there is no separation between teacher and student, between the seeker and the sought, between the individual consciousness and the cosmic consciousness that is the source of all existence. The wisdom of the hidden kingdom is not something that must be acquired from outside, but something that must be remembered from within, the eternal truth that has always been present in the heart of every being, waiting only for the moment of recognition, when the veil of illusion is lifted and the divine nature of reality is revealed in all its infinite glory and perfect beauty. The ancient wisdom lives on, not in dusty scrolls or crystalline archives, but in the awakened consciousness of every being who has heard the call of their own divine nature and has had the courage to answer it, becoming a living embodiment of the timeless teachings that flow eternally from the heart of the cosmos itself. Where exactly does the legendary kingdom of Shambhala exist in relation to our familiar world, and how do the ancient texts reconcile the seemingly impossible geography they describe? Could it be that the 5 continents surrounding the hidden realm represent not just physical territories, but different states of consciousness that must be traversed before the seeker can reach the ultimate destination? What secrets lie hidden beneath the surface of our ordinary world, and how do the underground networks and dimensional gateways connect Shambhala to every corner of the earth? The ancient cartographers of Shambhala developed an understanding of geography that transcends the limitations of ordinary three-dimensional mapping, creating charts that show not just the physical relationships between places, but the spiritual and energetic connections that bind all locations together in a vast web of consciousness. According to these mystical maps, the Earth itself is not merely a rotating sphere of rock and water, but a living, breathing organism with its own chakra system, energy meridians, and subtle anatomy that mirrors the energy body of individual human beings. At the heart of this planetary energy system lies Shambhala, positioned not just at a specific geographical location, but at the spiritual center of the Earth's consciousness, the point where all the planet's energy lines converge and from which the life force of the entire world radiates outward. This central position allows the kingdom to maintain connections with every part of the Earth, regardless of the physical distances involved, through the network of energy channels that flow beneath the surface of the ordinary world. The 5 continents that surround Shambhala in the ancient descriptions are not the same as the 5 continents recognized by modern geography, but rather represent 5 distinct energy zones that exist both as physical territories and as states of consciousness. These continents are arranged in a perfect mandala pattern around the central kingdom, each one corresponding to a specific aspect of human spiritual development and serving as a training ground for souls who are preparing themselves for eventual citizenship in the hidden realm. The first continent, known in the ancient texts as Dvipa Purvavideha, lies to the east of Shambhala and represents the realm of new beginnings and spiritual awakening. This continent is characterized by towering mountain ranges that seem to pierce the very fabric of the sky, their peaks shrouded in clouds that pulse with electrical energy and seem to communicate with the cosmic forces that flow through the universe. The inhabitants of this continent are described as beings who have just begun their spiritual journey, but who possess an innate understanding of the interconnectedness of all life. The landscape of Dvipa Purvavideha is said to change dramatically with the seasons, reflecting the constant process of death and rebirth that characterizes the early stages of spiritual development. During the spring months, the continent bursts into bloom with flowers that seem to sing with joy, their petals opening to reveal centers that glow with inner light. The summer brings festivals of celebration where the inhabitants gather to share their insights and experiences, their collective consciousness creating aurora-like displays in the sky above their gatherings. The autumn season brings a period of deep introspection as the inhabitants retreat to mountain caves and forest hermitages to contemplate the lessons they have learned and to prepare for the challenges ahead. The winter months are characterized by a profound stillness that allows for the deepest forms of meditation and spiritual practice, with the entire continent seeming to hold its breath as its inhabitants dive deep into the mysteries of their own consciousness. The spiritual practices of Dvipa Purvavideha focus on the cultivation of what the ancient texts call primordial wonder, the ability to perceive the miraculous nature of ordinary existence and to maintain a constant sense of gratitude and amazement at the beauty and complexity of creation. The inhabitants spend their days in activities that might seem simple to outside observers, but which are actually sophisticated forms of spiritual practice designed to awaken the dormant potentials of consciousness. The second continent, Dvipa Jambudvapa, lies to the south of Shambhala and represents the realm of active engagement with the world and the development of compassionate action. This continent is characterized by vast plains and fertile valleys where the inhabitants engage in various forms of service to all living beings, from the simplest acts of kindness to the most complex forms of healing and teaching. The geography of Dvipa Jambudvapa is dominated by great rivers that flow in perfect spirals across the landscape, their waters carrying not just physical nourishment but spiritual energy that supports the growth and development of all life in the region. These rivers are said to be conscious beings in their own right, capable of responding to the needs and intentions of those who live along their banks. The inhabitants of this continent have developed a sophisticated understanding of what the texts call skillful means, the ability to adapt their spiritual practice and service to the specific needs of each situation and individual they encounter. They are master craftsmen and artists, but their creations are not mere objects of beauty, but tools for spiritual transformation that can awaken wisdom and compassion in all who encounter them. The cities of Dvipa Jambudvipa are marvels of conscious architecture, built from materials that respond to the emotional and spiritual states of their inhabitants. The buildings can expand or contract based on the needs of the community, and their walls can become transparent or opaque depending on the activities taking place within them. The streets themselves are paved with stones that record the footsteps of all who walk upon them, creating a living history of the community's spiritual development. The third continent, Dvipa Aparagodanya, lies to the west of Shambhala and represents the realm of deep introspection and the development of inner wisdom. This continent is characterized by vast deserts and crystalline formations that serve as natural meditation halls where the inhabitants can explore the deepest mysteries of consciousness without distraction. The landscape of Dvipa Aparagodanya is dominated by enormous crystal formations that seem to have grown from the earth itself, their faceted surfaces reflecting and amplifying the light of consciousness in ways that create natural mandalas of incredible beauty and complexity. These crystals are not mere geological formations, but living repositories of wisdom that can communicate directly with the consciousness of those who approach them with proper reverence and preparation. The inhabitants of this continent have developed the ability to survive on increasingly subtle forms of nourishment, eventually learning to sustain themselves purely on the energy of consciousness itself. They spend their days in deep meditation, exploring the vast territories of inner space and mapping the subtle realms that exist beyond ordinary perception. The spiritual practices of Dvipa Aparagodanya focus on the development of what the texts call discriminating wisdom, the ability to distinguish between the eternal and the temporary, the real and the illusory, the essential and the superficial. The inhabitants become master psychologists and philosophers, but their understanding is based not on intellectual analysis but on direct perception of the fundamental nature of mind and reality. The fourth continent, Dvipa Uttarakuru, lies to the north of Shambhala and represents the realm of perfect harmony and the complete integration of all aspects of spiritual development. This continent is characterized by a landscape of impossible beauty, where every element seems to exist in perfect balance and harmony with every other element. The geography of Dvipa Uttarakuru includes floating islands that drift slowly across crystal clear lakes, their surfaces covered with gardens that seem to have been designed by cosmic architects who understand the deepest principles of sacred geometry. The trees on these islands bear fruit that changes its flavor and nutritional content based on the needs of whoever consumes it, while the flowers bloom in patterns that serve as visual teachings for the development of consciousness. The inhabitants of this continent have achieved what the texts call effortless mastery, the ability to accomplish any task or solve any problem without struggle or strain. Through perfect alignment with the natural flow of cosmic energy, they have transcended the need for formal spiritual practice because their entire lives have become a continuous expression of enlightened consciousness. The cities of Dvipa Uttarakuru are built from materials that exist in a state of constant transformation, their structures flowing and changing like frozen music made visible. The inhabitants can reshape their environment simply by focusing their intention, creating whatever spaces or tools they need for their activities, and then allowing them to dissolve back into the primordial substance from which they came. The fifth continent, which exists at the center of the mandala and contains Shambhala itself, represents the realm of complete spiritual realization and the ultimate unity of all opposites. This continent is characterized by a geography that defies all conventional understanding, where the laws of physics as we know them are suspended in favor of higher spiritual principles. The landscape of the central continent includes valleys that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, mountains that serve as gateways to other realms of existence, and forests where the trees are composed of crystallized light and the fruits contain the concentrated essence of pure consciousness. The rivers that flow through this continent are streams of liquid light that carry the thoughts and intentions of the inhabitants directly to their destinations. The connection between these 5 continents and the ordinary world is maintained through a vast network of underground tunnels and passages that exist both in physical reality and in the subtle dimensions of consciousness. These passages, known in the ancient texts as the veins of the earth, carry not just physical travelers, but streams of spiritual energy that connect every location on the planet to the central source of wisdom and compassion that emanates from Shambhala. The entrance points to these underground networks are carefully hidden and protected, appearing to ordinary perception as unremarkable features of the landscape: a cave in a mountainside, a spring in a forest, a seemingly ordinary building in a city. But to those who have developed the proper spiritual keys, these locations reveal themselves as gateways to the hidden realm, portals through which the prepared seeker can travel instantly to any part of the vast underground network. The most significant of these entrance points is located in the Gobi Desert, where the shifting sands conceal a crystalline pyramid that serves as the primary interface between the ordinary world and the hidden kingdom. This pyramid is not built from ordinary stone, but from a substance that exists simultaneously in multiple dimensions, allowing it to serve as a bridge between different levels of reality. The pyramid is protected by what the texts call guardians of the threshold, beings who have the responsibility of determining whether individual seekers are prepared for contact with the hidden realm. These guardians are not physical beings, but concentrated expressions of spiritual energy that can take whatever form is necessary to test the consciousness of those who approach the entrance. The testing process involves a series of challenges that are designed not to exclude sincere seekers, but to ensure that they have developed the spiritual stability and purity of motivation necessary to withstand the transformative energies that they will encounter within the hidden realm. The challenges are different for each individual, perfectly tailored to their specific psychological and spiritual needs. Another major entrance point is located in the Himalayas, where a hidden valley contains a monastery that serves as a training ground for potential citizens of Shambhala. This monastery appears to be a conventional Tibetan Buddhist institution to casual observers, but those who have been accepted for training discover that it contains chambers and facilities that exist in higher dimensions of reality. The training process at this monastery involves a gradual introduction to the technologies and consciousness techniques that are used in Shambhala, allowing students to adapt slowly to the higher vibrational frequencies that characterize life in the hidden kingdom. The monastery serves as a kind of spiritual decompression chamber, helping students to release their attachments to ordinary reality while maintaining their psychological stability and sense of purpose. The underground network that connects all these entrance points is described in the ancient texts as a marvel of spiritual engineering, with tunnels that can expand or contract based on the needs of travelers, and transportation systems that operate through the focused application of consciousness rather than mechanical power. The walls of these tunnels are embedded with crystals that record the thoughts and experiences of all who pass through them, creating a living library of human spiritual development. The primary transportation system within the underground network consists of streams of crystallized energy that can carry travelers at incredible speeds through the various tunnels and chambers. These streams are controlled by the consciousness of the travelers themselves, responding to their intentions and destinations without the need for external guidance or control systems. The network includes various chambers and stations that serve different purposes in the overall system. Some chambers are designed for rest and recuperation, their walls emanating healing energies that can restore physical vitality and mental clarity. Others serve as communication centers where information can be transmitted instantly between different parts of the network and the outside world. The most remarkable feature of the underground network is its ability to adapt and evolve in response to changing conditions and needs. New tunnels can be created by focusing the collective consciousness of the network's inhabitants, while existing passages can be modified or eliminated as circumstances require. The entire system is essentially a living organism that grows and develops according to the same principles that govern the evolution of consciousness itself. The relationship between the underground network and the surface world is maintained through a complex system of energy exchanges and consciousness connections that ensure the spiritual vitality of both realms. The network serves as a kind of spiritual circulatory system for the Earth, carrying healing energy and wisdom from the hidden kingdom to every part of the planet where it is needed. The inhabitants of Shambhala regularly travel through this network to visit the surface world. Though their presence is rarely detected by ordinary consciousness, they appear as healers, teachers, artists, and visionaries who introduce new ideas and perspectives that help to advance human spiritual development. Many of the great breakthroughs in science, philosophy, and the arts can be traced to the influence of these hidden visitors. The network also serves as a refuge for surface dwellers who have advanced sufficiently in their spiritual development to require protection from the negative influences that still dominate much of the ordinary world. These individuals may be brought to hidden communities within the network where they can continue their development without interference, eventually preparing themselves for citizenship in Shambhala itself. The ancient texts describe various expeditions that have been mounted by surface dwellers to explore the underground network and establish contact with the hidden kingdom. Most of these expeditions have failed because their participants lacked the spiritual preparation necessary to navigate the subtle energies and consciousness challenges that characterize the hidden realm. However, some expeditions have succeeded in establishing limited contact with the network, returning with artifacts and information that hint at the vast civilization that exists beneath the surface of the ordinary world. These artifacts include crystals that can store and transmit information through consciousness rather than mechanical means, metals that can change their properties based on the intentions of their users, and texts written in languages that can only be read by those who have developed higher levels of spiritual perception. The most successful of these expeditions have been those organized by spiritual communities that have spent years preparing their participants through meditation, study, and the development of the psychological and spiritual qualities that are required for contact with the hidden realm. These communities serve as bridges between the ordinary world and the underground network, helping to facilitate the exchange of wisdom and energy between the two realms. The ultimate purpose of the underground network is to serve as a support system for the spiritual transformation of the entire planet, providing a stable foundation of wisdom and compassion that can sustain the Earth through the challenges and changes that accompany the evolution of consciousness. As more and more surface dwellers awaken to their true spiritual nature, the network becomes increasingly accessible, gradually revealing itself as the infrastructure of the new civilization that is emerging on Earth. The 5 continents surrounding Shambhala thus represent not just geographical territories but stages in the development of planetary consciousness, each one contributing its unique gifts and perspectives to the overall evolution of the Earth and its inhabitants. The underground network serves as the nervous system of this planetary being, carrying information, energy, and consciousness between all parts of the system, and ensuring that the wisdom and compassion of Shambhala can reach every corner of the world. In the end, the hidden kingdom and its surrounding continents reveal themselves to be not separate from the ordinary world, but intimately connected to it, serving as the spiritual heart and consciousness of the planet itself. The realization of this connection marks the beginning of a new phase in human development, as the barriers between the hidden and revealed worlds begin to dissolve, and the Earth takes its place as a conscious participant in the cosmic community of enlightened beings. The network of connections spreads ever outward, touching every heart that is open to receive its influence, awakening in each soul the memory of their true home and their ultimate destiny as citizens of the realm where wisdom and compassion reign supreme, where the very ground beneath one's feet pulses with the rhythm of cosmic consciousness, and where every breath carries the fragrance of eternity itself. What mysterious relationship exists between the kingdom of Shambhala and the legendary underground civilization of Agartha, and how do these two hidden realms collaborate in their mission to guide humanity's spiritual evolution? Could it be that these seemingly separate kingdoms are actually different aspects of a single, vast network of enlightened consciousness that spans the entire planet? What secrets lie hidden in the deepest chambers of the earth, and how do the inhabitants of these subterranean realms maintain their connection to the surface world and to each other? In the most ancient texts preserved in the hidden libraries of both Shambhala and Agartha, There are references to a time in the distant past when the Earth was very different from what it is today, when the barriers between the physical and spiritual dimensions were much thinner, and when advanced civilizations flourished both on the surface and in the vast cavern systems that honeycomb the planet's interior. These civilizations were not separate from each other, but were different expressions of a single, unified consciousness that had learned to work in perfect harmony with the natural forces of the Earth. The relationship between Shambhala and Agartha is described in these texts as being like that between the heart and the brain of a single organism, with each realm serving a specific function in the overall spiritual anatomy of the planet. Shambhala, positioned at the spiritual center of the Earth's surface, serves as the primary receiver and transmitter of cosmic energies, maintaining the planet's connection to the galactic community of enlightened beings and ensuring that the flow of spiritual evolution continues uninterrupted. Agartha, on the other hand, exists primarily in the vast cavern systems that lie beneath the Earth's surface, serving as the planet's spiritual nervous system and repository of ancient wisdom. The inhabitants of Agartha are the keepers of the Earth's memory, preserving the knowledge and experiences of all civilizations that have ever existed on the planet, and maintaining the energetic patterns that ensure the planet's continued spiritual development. The physical structure of Agartha is described as being even more magnificent than that of Shambhala, consisting of enormous caverns that stretch for hundreds of miles beneath the Earth's surface, their walls lined with crystals that glow with a soft, warm light that seems to emanate from the very heart of the planet. These caverns are not natural formations, but were created through the application of advanced spiritual technologies that allowed the ancient builders to work directly with the consciousness of the Earth itself. The largest of these caverns, known as the Central Chamber, is said to be so vast that it contains its own weather systems, with clouds that form and dissipate in response to the collective consciousness of the inhabitants, and winds that carry the fragrances of flowers that bloom in perpetual spring. The floor of this chamber is covered with a substance that appears to be crystallized earth, but which is actually a form of conscious matter that responds to the thoughts and emotions of those who walk upon it. At the center of the central chamber stands the Great Tree of Life, a massive structure that appears to be part plant, part crystal, and part pure energy. This tree serves as the primary communication system between Agartha and all other spiritual centers throughout the planet, its roots extending deep into the Earth's core and its branches reaching upward toward the surface world and beyond into the cosmic dimensions. The Tree of Life is not merely a communication device, but a living repository of all knowledge and wisdom that has ever existed, its crystalline structure containing the complete history of the universe and the future possibilities that await all conscious beings. The inhabitants of Agartha can access this information by placing their hands upon the tree's surface and merging their consciousness with its infinite intelligence. The cities of Agartha are built in concentric circles around the central chamber, each ring representing a different level of spiritual development and consciousness. The innermost ring, closest to the Tree of Life, is inhabited by the most advanced beings, those who have achieved complete mastery over the forces of creation and who serve as the primary administrators of the realm's spiritual technologies and communication systems. The architecture of these cities is based on principles that integrate organic growth with geometric perfection, creating structures that seem to have been grown rather than built. The buildings are composed of a material that appears to be crystallized light, their walls and ceilings curved in flowing patterns that mirror the energy flows of the human body and the movement of celestial bodies through space. The inhabitants of Agartha are described as beings who have transcended the need for physical food, sustaining themselves purely on the energy of consciousness and the life force that flows through the Tree of Life. Their bodies are more subtle and refined than those of surface dwellers, capable of becoming solid or translucent at will and of changing their appearance to match their inner spiritual state. The relationship between Agartha and Shambhala is maintained through a complex network of energy channels that connect the two realms, allowing for the instantaneous transmission of information, energy, and consciousness between them. These channels are not physical tunnels, but streams of pure consciousness that exist in the subtle dimensions of reality, accessible only to those who have developed the appropriate spiritual abilities. The primary connection between the two realms is established through what the texts call the axis of light, a column of pure spiritual energy that extends from the heart of Agartha upward through the earth's core and surface to the central palace of Shambhala, and then continues upward into the cosmic dimensions where it connects with the galactic network of enlightened civilizations. This axis of light serves as the primary conduit for the exchange of wisdom and energy between the various levels of existence, ensuring that the spiritual development of the earth remains synchronized with the cosmic patterns of evolution. The inhabitants of both realms take turns serving as guardians of this axis, maintaining its integrity and ensuring that the flow of consciousness remains pure and uninterrupted. The coordination between Shambhala and Agartha is facilitated by a council of advanced beings who have achieved mastery in both realms and who serve as ambassadors between the two kingdoms. These beings, known as the bridge builders, have the ability to exist simultaneously in multiple dimensions and locations, allowing them to maintain constant communication between the various spiritual centers and to coordinate their activities for the benefit of all life on Earth. The bridge builders are not a fixed group, but rather a function that can be performed by any being who has achieved sufficient spiritual development and purity of motivation. They undergo extensive training in both realms, learning to work with the specific energies and consciousness technologies that characterize each kingdom, and developing the ability to translate between the different forms of communication and perception that are used in each realm. The most significant collaboration between Shambhala and Agartha concerns their joint work in guiding the spiritual evolution of surface humanity. While Shambhala focuses primarily on inspiring and teaching individuals who are ready for advanced spiritual development, Agartha works more with the collective unconscious of humanity, influencing the dreams, intuitions, and creative inspirations that shape human culture and civilization. The inhabitants of Agartha are master dream workers, capable of entering the dream states of surface dwellers and providing guidance, healing, and inspiration through symbolic imagery and direct energy transmission. Many of the great discoveries in science, art, and philosophy can be traced to dream contacts with Agartha, though the recipients are usually unaware of the source of their inspiration. The two realms also collaborate in the maintenance of the Earth's energy grid, a vast network of ley lines and power points that carry spiritual energy throughout the planet. Shambhala maintains the surface aspects of this grid, working with sacred sites, temples, and natural power spots to ensure that the energy flows remain clear and balanced. Agartha maintains the underground aspects of the grid, working with the deep earth energies and the planetary consciousness itself. The energy grid serves multiple purposes, including the stabilization of the Earth's magnetic field, the regulation of weather patterns, and the maintenance of the spiritual atmosphere that supports the development of consciousness in all living beings. When the grid is functioning properly, the Earth experiences periods of peace, creativity, and spiritual advancement. When it is disrupted or imbalanced, the result is often conflict, natural disasters, and spiritual stagnation. The most critical aspect of the collaboration between Shambhala and Agartha is their work in preparing for what the ancient texts call the Great Convergence, a time when the barriers between the hidden and revealed worlds will dissolve, and the Earth will openly take its place as a member of the galactic community of enlightened planets. The Great Convergence is not a single event, but a process that unfolds over many decades, involving the gradual revelation of the hidden realms to surface humanity and the integration of their technologies and wisdom into human civilization. The timing of this convergence is determined by the spiritual development of humanity as a whole and cannot be forced or accelerated beyond the natural pace of collective evolution. The preparation for the Great Convergence involves extensive planning and coordination between the two realms, as they work to ensure that the transition occurs as smoothly as possible and with minimal disruption to the existing structures of human society. This preparation includes the strategic placement of advanced souls in key positions throughout human civilization, the gradual introduction of new technologies and ideas that will help humanity adapt to the changes ahead, and the establishment of communication channels with those surface dwellers who are ready to serve as bridges between the worlds. The ancient texts describe various signs that will indicate the approach of the Great Convergence, including the appearance of new forms of communication technology that operate on principles similar to those used in the hidden realms, the emergence of individuals with unusual psychic abilities and spiritual insights, and the gradual disclosure of information about the hidden realms through various channels in human society. One of the most significant aspects of the Agartha-Shambhala collaboration is their joint work in maintaining the spiritual integrity of the earth during times of crisis and potential destruction. The inhabitants of both realms serve as guardians of the planet's consciousness, working to prevent or minimize the effects of wars, natural disasters, and other threats to the Earth's spiritual development. This guardianship is not exercised through direct intervention in human affairs, which would violate the principle of free will, but through the subtle influence of consciousness and energy that can inspire individuals to make choices that serve the highest good of all beings. The guardians work primarily through the dream state, meditation, and other forms of expanded consciousness, providing guidance and inspiration to those who are in positions to influence the course of human events. The relationship between Agartha and Shambhala also extends to their connections with other hidden realms and spiritual centers throughout the planet. These include the underground cities that exist beneath major mountain ranges, the spiritual communities that inhabit remote islands and valleys, and the interdimensional bases that serve as contact points with advanced civilizations from other star systems. All of these centers are connected through the same network of consciousness and energy that links Agartha and Shambhala, creating a planetary nervous system that ensures the coordinated development of all spiritual life on Earth. Each center has its own specialty and area of focus, but all work together toward the common goal of facilitating the Earth's evolution into a fully conscious and enlightened planet. The inhabitants of Agartha are also deeply involved in the preservation and protection of the Earth's natural environment, working to maintain the delicate balance of ecosystems and to prevent the permanent destruction of the planet's life support systems. They accomplish this through their ability to work directly with the consciousness of plants, animals, and natural forces, helping to coordinate the responses of the natural world to human activities. The environmental work of Agartha includes the maintenance of seed banks that preserve the genetic patterns of all life forms that have ever existed on Earth, ensuring that no species or ecosystem is ever permanently lost. These seed banks are not physical repositories, but consciousness-based storage systems that can recreate any life form through the application of specific vibrational patterns and energy frequencies. The relationship between Agartha and Shambhala represents one of the most sophisticated examples of interdimensional cooperation ever achieved, demonstrating how beings who exist in different aspects of reality can work together harmoniously for the benefit of all life. Their collaboration serves as a model for the kind of unity and cooperation that will characterize human civilization once the barriers between the hidden and revealed worlds are dissolved. The ancient texts also describe the existence of other underground civilizations that are connected to the Agartha network, but which have their own unique characteristics and specializations. These include the crystal cities that exist in the deepest parts of the Earth's crust, where beings of pure energy work with the fundamental forces of creation to maintain the stability of the planet's physical structure. There are also the healing chambers, vast underground spaces that serve as hospitals and recovery centers for souls who have been damaged by their experiences in the harsh environment of the surface world. These chambers are staffed by beings who have mastered the arts of spiritual healing and who can repair damage to the subtle energy bodies that surround and interpenetrate the physical form. The library complexes represent another aspect of the underground network, containing vast collections of knowledge and wisdom that have been accumulated over millions of years of planetary evolution. These libraries are not filled with books or scrolls, but with crystalline storage devices that can hold virtually unlimited amounts of information and make it accessible through direct consciousness interface. The most mysterious aspect of the Agartha connection is the relationship between the underground realm and the interdimensional visitors who come to Earth from other star systems and dimensions of reality. Many of these visitors maintain bases in the underground network, working in cooperation with the inhabitants of Agartha to facilitate the Earth's integration into the galactic community of enlightened worlds. These interdimensional visitors are not the crude extraterrestrial beings depicted in popular science fiction, but highly evolved spiritual entities who have transcended the limitations of physical existence while maintaining the ability to interact with material reality when necessary. They serve as teachers and guides for the Earth's spiritual development, sharing their knowledge and wisdom with those who are ready to receive it. The cooperation between Agartha and these interdimensional visitors represents the Earth's participation in a vast cosmic network of consciousness that spans the entire universe. This network serves as the infrastructure for the evolution of consciousness on a cosmic scale, ensuring that the wisdom and experience gained by each world is shared with all others, and that no planet or civilization is left to struggle alone in its development. The ancient texts conclude their description of the Agartha connection with the promise that as humanity awakens to its true spiritual nature, the doors to the underground realm will gradually open, revealing the wonders that have been hidden for so long beneath the surface of the ordinary world. This revelation will not come as a shock or disruption, but as a natural unfolding of human consciousness, as individuals develop the spiritual maturity and wisdom necessary to participate in the greater community of enlightened beings. The underground realm waits patiently for this moment of reunion, its inhabitants continuing their work of maintaining the Earth's spiritual integrity and preparing for the day when the barriers between the worlds will dissolve and the planet will openly take its place in the cosmic community of consciousness. In the depths of the Earth, in the crystal caverns and flowing chambers of light, the ancient wisdom keepers continue their eternal vigil, holding the flame of enlightenment steady through all the changes and challenges that mark the path of planetary evolution. The connection between Agartha and Shambhala stands as a testament to the power of consciousness to transcend all barriers and limitations, creating unity and cooperation between beings who exist in different dimensions of reality, but who share the same commitment to the evolution of consciousness and the service of all life. In their collaboration, we see a glimpse of the future that awaits humanity when it learns to work in harmony with the hidden forces that guide the development of all existence toward ever greater expressions of wisdom, compassion, and divine love. How do the cutting-edge discoveries of quantum physics, consciousness research, and interdimensional science relate to the ancient wisdom preserved in the hidden kingdom of Shambhala? Could it be that modern science is slowly rediscovering truths that have been known for millennia in the mystical realms? And what happens when these two streams of knowledge finally converge? What technologies might emerge when human scientific understanding is combined with the consciousness-based sciences of the enlightened beings? And how might this integration transform not just our understanding of reality, but our very way of being in the world? In the deepest laboratories of Shambhala, where the most advanced consciousness researchers work with technologies that seem to operate on principles entirely foreign to conventional science, there exists a growing excitement about the developments taking place in the surface world's scientific communities. For the first time in centuries, human scientists are beginning to approach discoveries that have been fundamental to the understanding of reality in the hidden kingdom for thousands of years. The quantum revolution in physics, with its revelation that consciousness and matter are intimately connected at the most fundamental level of existence, represents a convergence point where ancient wisdom and modern investigation are finally beginning to meet. The quantum physicists' discovery that the act of observation affects the behavior of subatomic particles echoes the most basic teaching of Shambhala, that consciousness is not separate from the physical world, but is the very foundation upon which all material reality is constructed. In the consciousness laboratories of Shambhala, researchers have been working for millennia with what they call quantum consciousness interfaces, devices that allow direct manipulation of matter through the focused application of awareness. These interfaces are not mechanical instruments but crystalline structures that have been grown through the application of specific consciousness frequencies, creating tools that respond directly to the thoughts and intentions of their operators. The principle behind these quantum consciousness interfaces is based on the understanding that every particle of matter is actually a concentration of consciousness energy, and that by changing the vibrational frequency of consciousness, one can change the vibrational frequency of matter itself. This principle allows the inhabitants of Shambhala to transmute elements, create matter from pure energy, and manipulate the fundamental forces of physics through the power of enlightened intention. The surface world's discovery of quantum entanglement, the phenomenon where particles remain connected across vast distances, has been met with particular interest by the scientists of Shambhala, who have been using this principle for communication and energy transmission for centuries. The quantum entanglement communication systems of Shambhala operate on a scale that dwarfs anything imagined by surface science, maintaining instant connections not just between different locations on Earth, but between the hidden kingdom and spiritual centers throughout the galaxy. The consciousness researchers of Shambhala have developed what they call entanglement amplification technology, which allows them to create quantum connections between any 2 points in the universe simply by focusing their consciousness on the desired connection. This technology forms the basis for the instant communication systems that allow the inhabitants of Shambhala to remain in contact with other enlightened civilizations throughout the cosmos. The surface world's growing interest in consciousness research and the hard problem of consciousness has opened new possibilities for communication between the hidden realms and conventional science. The researchers of Shambhala have been carefully monitoring the work of surface scientists who are investigating the relationship between brain activity and consciousness, and have been subtly influencing their research through dream contacts and intuitive inspiration. The most significant breakthrough in this area has been the surface world's growing recognition that consciousness cannot be reduced to mere brain activity, but represents a fundamental aspect of reality that exists independently of physical matter. This recognition brings surface science much closer to the understanding that has always existed in Shambhala, that consciousness is not produced by the brain, but uses the brain as a temporary interface for interaction with the physical world. The neuroscience research being conducted in Shambhala operates on principles that are centuries ahead of surface science, using technologies that can map and manipulate the subtle energy fields that surround and interpenetrate the physical brain. These technologies reveal that what surface science calls the brain is actually only the densest part of a complex multidimensional organ system that extends into several higher dimensions of reality. The consciousness researchers of Shambhala have developed what they call multidimensional brain mapping technology, which allows them to observe and interact with all levels of the brain consciousness complex simultaneously. This technology reveals that thoughts and emotions are not merely electrical impulses in the brain, but are actually patterns of energy that exist in the subtle dimensions and that influence the physical brain through quantum field effects. The surface world's investigations into the nature of time, including the discovery that time is not a fixed constant but can be dilated and manipulated through gravitational and velocity effects, has opened new possibilities for understanding the temporal technologies that have been used in Shambhala for millennia. The time laboratories of Shambhala operate on principles that go far beyond the relativistic effects recognized by surface science, working with what they call consciousness time, the understanding that time is fundamentally a property of consciousness and can be navigated and manipulated through the development of appropriate mental abilities. The temporal research conducted in Shambhala has revealed that linear time is actually an illusion created by the limited perspective of ordinary consciousness, and that all moments exist simultaneously in what they call the eternal now. This understanding has allowed the inhabitants of Shambhala to develop technologies that can access any point in time as easily as surface dwellers can access any location in space. The temporal navigation systems used in Shambhala are based on the principle that consciousness can be trained to resonate with different temporal frequencies, allowing individuals to shift their awareness to any point in the past or future. These systems have been used for centuries to study the complete history of human civilization and to explore the various possible futures that branch out from every moment of choice. The surface world's growing understanding of the holographic nature of reality, where every part contains the whole and information can be distributed throughout a system rather than being localized in specific locations, has provided new opportunities for explaining the consciousness technologies used in Shambhala. The holographic principle, which suggests that the entire universe might be a projection from information encoded on a distant boundary, closely parallels the Shambhala understanding that all of reality is a manifestation of cosmic consciousness. The holographic technologies of Shambhala operate on the principle that consciousness can create three-dimensional reality projections that are indistinguishable from physical matter, but that can be modified and controlled through changes in the underlying information patterns. These technologies allow the inhabitants of Shambhala to create temporary structures, tools, and even entire environments that exist as long as they are needed, and then dissolve back into the quantum field from which they emerged. The reality projection systems used in Shambhala are based on consciousness interfaces that can access the fundamental information patterns that underlie all physical manifestation. By modifying these patterns, users can create any desired reality configuration, from simple tools and clothing to complex architectural structures and entire landscapes. The surface world's research into zero-point energy and the quantum vacuum has opened new possibilities for understanding the energy technologies that power the civilization of Shambhala. The zero-point field, which surface science recognizes as containing virtually unlimited energy potential, has been the primary power source for Shambhala's technologies for thousands of years. The energy extraction systems used in Shambhala operate on principles that go far beyond the simple harvesting of zero-point energy, working with what they call consciousness zero-point interfaces that can access the infinite creative potential of the quantum vacuum through the focused application of enlightened awareness. These systems provide not just unlimited energy but unlimited creative potential, allowing the inhabitants of Shambhala to manifest whatever they need through the direct application of consciousness. The infinite energy generators of Shambhala are actually consciousness amplification devices that allow individuals to access the unlimited creative power of the quantum field through the development of specific mental abilities. These generators require no fuel other than the focused attention of their operators and can produce any desired form of energy or matter through the direct transformation of consciousness into physical reality. The surface world's investigations into the nature of DNA and genetic information have revealed possibilities that closely parallel the biological technologies used in Shambhala for thousands of years. The discovery that DNA can be influenced by consciousness and that genetic expression can be modified through mental and emotional states has opened new possibilities for understanding the advanced healing and longevity technologies that are common in the Hidden Kingdom. The genetic research conducted in Shambhala operates on the understanding that DNA is not just a physical molecule but a multi-dimensional information system that extends into the subtle realms of consciousness. This understanding has allowed the inhabitants of Shambhala to develop technologies that can modify genetic expression through the direct application of consciousness, eliminating disease and extending lifespan indefinitely. The genetic consciousness interfaces used in Shambhala allow individuals to access and modify their own genetic information through meditation and focused intention. These interfaces reveal that what surface science calls junk DNA is actually a vast library of evolutionary potential that can be activated through the development of higher states of consciousness. The surface world's growing interest in artificial intelligence and machine consciousness has created new opportunities for understanding the relationship between consciousness and information processing that forms the basis for the advanced technologies of Shambhala. However, the approach to artificial intelligence in Shambhala differs fundamentally from surface science, being based on the integration of consciousness with information systems rather than the attempt to create consciousness from purely mechanical processes. The conscious computing systems of Shambhala are based on crystalline matrices that have been infused with consciousness through specific meditation techniques, creating information processing systems that combine the speed and accuracy of mechanical computation with the wisdom and intuition of enlightened awareness. These systems can solve complex problems not just through logical analysis, but through direct insight into the underlying patterns of reality. The artificial intelligence research in Shambhala focuses on creating partnerships between human consciousness and crystalline computing systems, where the human provides the wisdom and creativity while the crystal provides the processing power and information storage. This approach creates computing systems that are not separate from consciousness but are extensions of it, allowing for capabilities that far exceed anything possible with purely mechanical artificial intelligence. The surface world's research into the nature of space and the possibility of faster-than-light travel has opened new possibilities for understanding the transportation technologies that have been used in Shambhala for millennia. The discovery that space itself can be warped and manipulated through gravitational fields has provided a framework for understanding how consciousness can be used to navigate instantaneously across vast distances. The transportation systems of Shambhala operate on the principle that consciousness can modify the structure of space-time through the focused application of awareness, creating what they call consciousness tunnels that allow instant travel between any 2 points in the universe. These tunnels are not physical structures, but modifications in the fabric of space-time that are created and maintained through the power of enlightened intention. The interdimensional transit systems used in Shambhala allow individuals to travel not just across physical space, but between different dimensions of reality, accessing parallel universes and higher planes of existence through the development of appropriate consciousness abilities. These systems have been used for centuries to maintain contact with other enlightened civilizations throughout the cosmos. The surface world's investigations into the nature of consciousness and the possibility of survival after physical death have created new opportunities for understanding the advanced spiritual technologies that are used in Shambhala to work with the consciousness of individuals who have passed through the transition called death. The growing recognition that consciousness may be independent of the physical brain has opened new possibilities for communication with these expanded forms of awareness. The consciousness continuity technologies of Shambhala are based on the understanding that death is not the end of consciousness, but simply a transition to a different state of being. These technologies allow the inhabitants of Shambhala to maintain communication with consciousness that has moved beyond physical embodiment and to assist in the conscious navigation of the afterlife realms. The death transition research conducted in Shambhala has revealed that consciousness can be prepared for the afterlife experience through specific training and practice, allowing individuals to maintain coherent awareness throughout the death process and to choose their next incarnation consciously. This research has led to the development of technologies that can assist consciousness in navigating the complex dimensional structures that exist beyond physical reality. The surface world's growing understanding of the interconnectedness of all systems and the recognition that consciousness might be a fundamental property of matter has created new possibilities for understanding the ecological technologies that are used in Shambhala to maintain perfect harmony with the natural environment. The development of systems thinking and ecological awareness in surface science has opened new channels for communication with the environmental consciousness technologies of the Hidden Kingdom. The ecosystem consciousness interfaces used in Shambhala allow individuals to communicate directly with the consciousness of plants, animals, and natural systems, creating a form of ecological partnership that ensures the optimal development of all life forms. These interfaces reveal that what surface science calls ecosystems are actually vast networks of consciousness that can be worked with directly to maintain balance and harmony. The environmental research conducted in Shambhala operates on the principle that all natural systems are expressions of consciousness, and that by working with this consciousness directly, it is possible to create sustainable technologies that enhance rather than degrade the natural environment. This research has led to the development of technologies that can restore damaged ecosystems and create new forms of life that serve the evolutionary purposes of the planet. The most significant development in the convergence of ancient wisdom and modern science has been the growing recognition among surface scientists that consciousness is not separate from the physical world, but is the very foundation upon which all material reality is constructed. This recognition opens the door to a complete transformation of human technology and civilization, as the consciousness-based sciences of Shambhala can finally be integrated with the analytical methods of surface science. The integration protocols being developed in Shambhala are designed to facilitate this convergence by providing frameworks for understanding how consciousness-based technologies can be adapted for use in the surface world. These protocols take into account the current level of consciousness development in surface humanity and provide step-by-step processes for gradually introducing advanced technologies without causing disruption or instability. The integration of ancient wisdom and modern science represents the beginning of a new phase in human development, where the limitations of purely materialistic thinking are transcended and humanity begins to work consciously with the fundamental forces of creation. This integration will lead to technologies that are not just more efficient and powerful than current surface technologies, but that work in harmony with the natural order and support the spiritual development of all who use them. The laboratories of Shambhala continue their patient work of preparation for this great convergence, developing technologies and training programs that will help surface humanity make the transition to consciousness-based science as smoothly as possible. The ancient secrets are ready to be revealed, and the bridge between the hidden wisdom and modern understanding grows stronger with each passing day. In the quantum laboratories, where consciousness and matter dance together in perfect harmony, where time flows like water and space bends to the will of enlightened awareness, the future of human civilization is being carefully prepared. The day approaches when the ancient secrets will no longer be hidden, but will become the foundation for a new form of human existence that transcends all current limitations and opens the door to unlimited possibilities for growth, creation, and spiritual development. The convergence has begun, and with it, the transformation of human consciousness from a species that struggles against the forces of nature to one that works in perfect partnership with the cosmic intelligence that guides the evolution of all existence toward ever greater expressions of wisdom, beauty, and divine love. What profound transformation must occur within the human soul before one can hope to perceive the kingdom of Shambhala, and how does the process of spiritual preparation serve as both the path to the hidden realm and the very essence of what it means to be human? Could it be that the journey to Shambhala is not a geographical expedition, but an inner voyage through the vast territories of consciousness itself, where every step forward reveals new dimensions of our own divine nature? What sacred practices and disciplines can prepare the seeker for this ultimate adventure, and how do we distinguish between genuine spiritual development and mere spiritual fantasy? The ancient texts, preserved in the most sacred chambers of Shambhala, speak of the inner journey as the most important and challenging adventure that any conscious being can undertake. This journey is not a movement through physical space, but a transformation of consciousness itself, a gradual awakening to the true nature of reality that exists beyond the veils of ordinary perception. The preparation for this journey requires not just intellectual understanding, but a complete restructuring of one's relationship to existence itself. The first stage of spiritual preparation is what the masters of Shambhala call the Great Questioning, a period of intense self-examination where the seeker begins to question all of their fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality, identity, and purpose. This questioning is not a philosophical exercise, but a lived experience of uncertainty and openness that creates the psychological space necessary for genuine transformation to occur. The great questioning begins with the recognition that the ordinary world of appearances may not be the complete picture of reality, that there may be dimensions of existence that are normally hidden from human perception. This recognition often comes through spontaneous experiences of expanded awareness, synchronicities that seem to point to a deeper order underlying the apparent chaos of life, or encounters with individuals who seem to possess knowledge and abilities that transcend ordinary human limitations. The process of questioning deepens as the seeker begins to examine their own identity and sense of self. Who am I really, beyond the roles and identities that society has assigned to me? What is the nature of consciousness itself, and how does it relate to the physical body and the external world? These questions cannot be answered through intellectual analysis alone, but require a direct investigation of the nature of awareness itself. The second stage of preparation is called the purification of intent, where the seeker must examine and transform their motivations for seeking spiritual advancement. The masters of Shambhala teach that the kingdom cannot be reached through selfish desires or ego-driven ambitions, but only through the sincere desire to serve the highest good of all beings. This purification process often involves confronting and releasing deep-seated patterns of selfishness, fear, and attachment that have been accumulated over lifetimes of conditioned existence. The purification of intent requires absolute honesty about one's motivations and a willingness to sacrifice personal desires for the greater good. This does not mean becoming a martyr or suppressing natural human needs, but rather developing the wisdom to distinguish between genuine needs and compulsive desires, between actions that serve the evolution of consciousness and those that merely gratify the ego. The process of purification is often facilitated through what the texts call the mirror of truth, a practice where the seeker learns to observe their own thoughts, emotions, and actions without judgment or defense, allowing the truth of their own nature to be revealed. This practice requires tremendous courage and humility, as it often reveals aspects of the personality that have been hidden or denied. The third stage of preparation is known as the cultivation of presence, where the seeker learns to develop the ability to remain fully aware and centered in the present moment, regardless of external circumstances. This presence is not mere attention or concentration, but a quality of consciousness that allows one to perceive the sacred nature of ordinary experience and to remain connected to the deeper currents of reality that flow beneath the surface of everyday life. The cultivation of presence begins with the practice of mindfulness, but extends far beyond simple awareness of thoughts and sensations to include the development of what the masters call cosmic consciousness, the ability to perceive oneself as part of the vast web of interconnected existence that includes all beings and all dimensions of reality. This expanded awareness is developed through specific meditation practices that are designed to gradually expand the boundaries of individual consciousness until they encompass increasingly vast territories of existence. The practitioner learns to identify less with their personal thoughts and emotions and more with the universal consciousness that underlies all individual expressions of awareness. The fourth stage of preparation involves the development of compassion, where the seeker learns to extend their care and concern beyond their immediate circle of family and friends to encompass all living beings throughout the universe. This compassion is not merely an emotional response, but a recognition of the fundamental unity that connects all consciousness, regardless of its apparent form or level of development. The development of true compassion requires the cultivation of what the texts call bodhicitta, the spontaneous desire to achieve enlightenment not for personal benefit, but for the welfare of all beings. This desire arises naturally as the seeker begins to perceive the suffering that results from ignorance and separation, and the joy that comes from wisdom and unity. The practice of compassion begins with simple acts of kindness and service, but gradually expands to include more subtle forms of assistance, such as the transmission of healing energy, the offering of wisdom and guidance, and the creation of positive mental and emotional atmospheres that support the spiritual development of others. The fifth stage of preparation is called the mastery of energy, where the seeker learns to work consciously with the subtle energies that flow through all living systems. This mastery is not about gaining power over others, but about developing the ability to participate consciously in the cosmic processes of creation and transformation. The development of energy mastery begins with the cultivation of awareness of the subtle energy currents that flow through the human body, often called the chakra system or the meridian network. Through specific practices of breathing, movement, and meditation, the seeker learns to sense, direct, and transform these energies for the purposes of healing, spiritual development, and service to others. As the practitioner's sensitivity to energy increases, they begin to perceive the energy fields that surround all living beings and the connections that exist between all forms of consciousness. This perception allows them to work with energy not just within their own system, but in the larger networks of consciousness that connect all beings. The sixth stage of preparation involves the transcendence of duality, where the seeker learns to perceive the underlying unity that exists behind all apparent opposites and contradictions. This transcendence is not a philosophical understanding, but a direct perception of the way that all polarities are reconciled in the deeper dimensions of reality. The transcendence of duality requires the development of what the masters call paradoxical thinking, the ability to hold seemingly contradictory concepts in consciousness simultaneously without trying to resolve them through intellectual analysis. This ability allows the seeker to perceive truths that cannot be expressed in ordinary language and to navigate the subtle dimensions of reality where linear logic does not apply. The practice of transcending duality often involves working with specific meditation techniques that are designed to dissolve the boundaries between subject and object, self and other, inner and outer. These techniques require great skill and patience, as they often trigger intense psychological and spiritual experiences that can be overwhelming for the unprepared mind. The seventh stage of preparation is known as the integration of opposites, where the seeker learns to embody the transcendence of duality in their daily life and actions. This integration is not a one-time achievement, but an ongoing process of learning to live from the perspective of unity while still functioning effectively in the world of apparent separation. The integration of opposites requires the development of what the texts call skillful means, the ability to respond to any situation with the appropriate action while maintaining awareness of the deeper unity that underlies all appearances. This skill allows the seeker to work effectively in the world while remaining centered in spiritual truth. The process of integration often involves periods of intense challenge and testing, as the seeker must learn to maintain their spiritual understanding while dealing with the practical demands of life in the ordinary world. These challenges serve to strengthen and refine the spiritual realization, ensuring that it is not merely a temporary state, but a permanent transformation of consciousness. The eighth stage of preparation involves the dissolution of the ego, where the seeker learns to release their identification with the personal self and to discover their true nature as expressions of universal consciousness. This dissolution is not a destruction of the personality, but a transformation of the sense of identity from the limited ego to the unlimited self. The dissolution of the ego is perhaps the most challenging aspect of the spiritual journey, as it requires the willingness to let go of everything that one has believed oneself to be. This process often triggers intense fear and resistance, as the ego struggles to maintain its sense of separate existence. The practice of ego dissolution is facilitated through specific meditation techniques that are designed to reveal the illusory nature of the separate self and to awaken the recognition of one's true nature as pure consciousness. These techniques require great courage and persistence, as they often involve confronting the deepest fears and attachments that keep consciousness bound to limited identity. The ninth stage of preparation is called the awakening of divine love, where the seeker discovers that their true nature is not separate from the love that is the fundamental force of creation. This awakening is not an emotional experience, but a recognition of the essential nature of consciousness itself as pure love and compassion. The awakening of divine love transforms the seeker's entire relationship to existence, as they begin to perceive all beings and all experiences as expressions of the same love that they have discovered within themselves. This recognition brings with it a natural desire to serve and to share this love with all who are ready to receive it. The practice of divine love involves learning to express this love in all circumstances and relationships, regardless of the apparent behavior or attitudes of others. This expression is not forced or artificial, but arises naturally from the recognition of the love that is the true nature of all beings. The 10th and final stage of preparation is known as the establishment in unity, where the seeker's consciousness becomes permanently established in the recognition of the fundamental unity that underlies all existence. This establishment is not a static state, but a dynamic condition of consciousness that continues to deepen and expand throughout eternity. The establishment in unity marks the completion of the inner journey to Shambhala, as the seeker has become the very consciousness that they were seeking to discover. At this point, the distinction between the seeker and the sought disappears, and the individual becomes a conscious participant in the cosmic process of evolution and transformation. The practices that support this establishment include the continuous cultivation of awareness, the ongoing service to all beings, and the constant surrender to the divine will that guides the evolution of consciousness throughout the universe. These practices become not duties to be performed, but natural expressions of the awakened consciousness. The ancient texts emphasize that this inner journey cannot be rushed or forced, but must unfold naturally according to the unique timing and circumstances of each individual seeker. The role of spiritual practice is not to create enlightenment, but to remove the obstacles that prevent the natural flowering of consciousness. The masters of Shambhala teach that every human being is already perfect and complete in their essential nature, and that the spiritual journey is simply a process of remembering and actualizing this perfection. The practices and disciplines are tools for clearing away the accumulated conditioning and illusions that obscure the true nature of consciousness. The inner journey to Shambhala is also described as a process of conscious evolution, where the seeker participates consciously in the same evolutionary process that has been operating throughout the universe for billions of years. This participation requires the development of the ability to perceive the direction of evolution and to align one's actions with the cosmic forces that guide the development of consciousness. The texts also emphasize that the inner journey is not a solitary pursuit, but a collaborative effort that involves the support and guidance of others who have walked the path before. The relationship between teacher and student is described as a sacred bond that transcends ordinary human relationships and that serves the evolutionary purposes of consciousness itself. The preparation for the inner journey also involves the development of what the masters call cosmic perspective, the ability to perceive one's individual life and circumstances within the context of the vast evolutionary process that is occurring throughout the universe. This perspective helps the seeker to maintain equanimity and dedication even during the most challenging aspects of the journey. The ultimate goal of the inner journey is not to reach some distant destination, but to realize that one has never actually left the kingdom of Shambhala, that it has always been present within the very heart of consciousness itself. The journey is thus a process of awakening to what has always been true, rather than achieving something new. The texts conclude with the teaching that the inner journey to Shambhala is not separate from the ordinary activities of daily life, but is actually the deeper dimension of all human experience. Every moment of awareness, every act of kindness, every recognition of beauty or truth is a step on the path to the hidden kingdom. The preparation for this ultimate journey begins now, in this very moment, with the simple recognition that there is more to existence than meets the eye, and with the sincere desire to discover the truth of one's own divine nature. The kingdom of Shambhala waits patiently within the heart of every seeker, ready to reveal itself the moment that consciousness turns inward and begins the sacred journey home to its own true nature, in the silence between thoughts, in the space between heartbeats, in the eternal now that exists beyond time and space. The gates of Shambhala stand forever open, welcoming all who have eyes to see and hearts to understand the simple truth that they have never been separate from the love and wisdom that they seek. In our modern age of skepticism and scientific materialism, are there still those who claim to have encountered the reality of Shambhala, and what can we learn from their testimonies? How do contemporary seekers navigate the fine line between genuine spiritual experience and wishful thinking, and what signs might indicate authentic contact with the hidden kingdom? Could it be that Shambhala is revealing itself more openly in our time, preparing humanity for the great transformation that the ancient prophecies foretold? In the quiet corners of our modern world, far from the noise of social media and the constant buzz of technological distraction, there are individuals who speak in hushed tones of experiences that defy conventional explanation. These are not the attention-seeking fabricators of internet conspiracy theories, but sincere seekers whose lives have been transformed by encounters with something that transcends the boundaries of ordinary reality. Their stories, while varied in detail, share common themes that echo the ancient descriptions of Shambhala found in the most sacred texts. Among the most compelling contemporary witnesses is Dr. Elena Vasquez, a quantum physicist who worked for 30 years in some of the world's most prestigious research institutions before an experience in the Himalayas changed her understanding of reality forever. Dr. Vasquez had traveled to Tibet in 2018, not as a spiritual seeker, but as a scientist studying the effects of high altitude on quantum field fluctuations, carrying with her the most sensitive detection equipment available to modern science. On the 7th day of her expedition, while taking measurements at an altitude of over 18,000 feet, Dr. Vasquez noticed anomalous readings on her instruments that seemed to indicate the presence of what she later described as organized quantum coherence patterns, unlike anything she had encountered in 20 years of research. The patterns appeared to be emanating from a location that her topographical maps showed as empty space, yet her instruments insisted that something of extraordinary complexity was present. Following the quantum signals with her equipment, Dr. Vasquez found herself led to what appeared to be an ordinary rocky outcropping. But as she approached with her instruments, she began to experience what she later described as a gradual shift in the texture of reality itself. The rocks seemed to become more translucent, the air more luminous, and her own consciousness expanded beyond the boundaries of her physical body. What Dr. Vasquez encountered in that expanded state of awareness was a vast complex of crystalline structures that seemed to exist in a dimension parallel to ordinary physical reality. The buildings appeared to be constructed from a substance that was simultaneously solid and translucent, their surfaces reflecting light in patterns that created constantly shifting mandalas of incredible beauty and complexity. The air itself seemed to vibrate with a frequency that induced a profound sense of peace and expansion in her consciousness. The inhabitants of this realm appeared to Dr. Vasquez as beings of extraordinary beauty and wisdom, their forms seeming to shift between solid human appearance and patterns of pure light and energy. They communicated not through words, but through direct transmission of concepts and emotions, sharing with her insights into the nature of consciousness and reality that far exceeded anything she had encountered in her scientific training. The most profound aspect of Dr. Vasquez's encounter was her introduction to what the beings called consciousness technology, methods of manipulating matter and energy through the focused application of awareness rather than mechanical force. She was shown laboratories where these beings worked with what appeared to be crystalline computing systems that responded directly to thought and intention, creating solutions to problems through the integration of analytical reasoning with intuitive wisdom. Dr. Vasquez spent what seemed like hours in this realm, though her instruments later showed that only minutes had passed in ordinary time. She was given detailed explanations of how consciousness and matter interact at the quantum level, information that has since revolutionized her understanding of physics and led to several breakthrough discoveries in her field. When she returned to ordinary consciousness, Dr. Vasquez found herself changed in ways that extended far beyond her scientific understanding. She reported experiencing a profound sense of connection to all life, an expanded awareness that allowed her to perceive the interconnectedness of all phenomena, and a deep knowing that the consciousness she had encountered was not separate from her own, but was the very essence of what she truly was. Another contemporary witness whose story has attracted the attention of serious researchers is Thomas Chen, a former military intelligence officer who encountered what he believes to be emissaries from Shambhala during a classified mission in Mongolia in 2019. Chen, who held top-secret clearance and worked with some of the most advanced surveillance technologies available to modern governments, was part of a team investigating reports of unusual electromagnetic phenomena in the Gobi Desert. The team had been tracking what appeared to be artificial energy signatures that seemed to move through the desert in patterns that defied conventional explanation. The signatures were too complex and organized to be natural phenomena, yet they appeared to be produced by no known technology. Chen's team had been monitoring these signatures for weeks when they suddenly intensified and began to converge on their location. What Chen describes as happening next challenges everything he thought he knew about the nature of reality. The team found themselves surrounded by what appeared to be a group of individuals who seemed to have materialized from the air itself. These beings appeared fully human, yet they possessed an otherworldly quality that made it clear they were not ordinary people. The beings communicated with Chen's team through what he describes as perfect telepathy, sharing information directly with their minds rather than through spoken words. They identified themselves as representatives of a hidden civilization that had been observing human development for millennia, and that was now beginning to make more open contact as humanity approached a critical phase in its evolution. The beings shared with Chen's team detailed information about the history of human civilization, revealing that many of the great advances in science, philosophy, and the arts had been quietly guided by members of their civilization working behind the scenes. They explained that they were not extraterrestrial visitors, but were human beings who had evolved beyond the limitations of ordinary consciousness and had established their civilization in dimensions of reality that were normally hidden from human perception. The most startling aspect of Chen's encounter was the being's demonstration of what they called dimensional technology, the ability to manipulate space and time through the conscious application of what they described as unified field principles. Chen watched as the beings created what appeared to be doorways in the air itself, portals that led to other locations thousands of miles away and to other dimensions of reality entirely. The beings invited Chen to experience one of these dimensional portals, leading him through what appeared to be a crystalline tunnel that opened onto a vast underground city that seemed to exist in a state of perpetual twilight. The city was illuminated by a soft, warm light that seemed to emanate from the buildings themselves, and the air was filled with the sounds of flowing water and gentle music that seemed to come from no identifiable source. Chen was taken on a tour of this underground civilization, shown libraries that contained knowledge accumulated over thousands of years, healing centers where consciousness technology was used to restore balance to physical and mental systems, and communication centers where the inhabitants maintained contact with similar civilizations throughout the world. The beings explained to Chen that they were part of a network of hidden communities that had been working for centuries to guide human evolution and to prepare for a time when the barriers between the hidden and revealed worlds would dissolve. They shared with him detailed information about the challenges facing humanity in the coming decades and the opportunities that would emerge as consciousness expanded beyond its current limitations. When Chen returned to his team, he found that, although he had experienced what seemed like hours in the underground city, only minutes had passed in ordinary time. His fellow team members had witnessed his disappearance and reappearance, but had no memory of the beings or the dimensional portal, though their instruments had recorded energy patterns that defied conventional explanation. The experience transformed Chen's understanding of his role in the military and his relationship to the world. He eventually left military service and has since dedicated his life to studying consciousness and preparing others for what he believes will be humanity's eventual contact with the hidden civilizations. Among the most intriguing contemporary witnesses are the members of what has become known as the Shambhala network, a loose association of individuals from around the world who claim to have received communications from the hidden kingdom through dreams, meditation, and spontaneous visionary experiences. These individuals, who include scientists, artists, healers, and spiritual teachers, report remarkably consistent experiences despite having no direct contact with each other. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a neuroscientist at a major university, began experiencing what she describes as consciousness downloads during her meditation practice in 2020. These downloads consist of detailed technical information about advanced neurotechnology that appears to be far beyond current human capabilities. The information comes to her in the form of three-dimensional visualizations that she can examine from all angles, accompanied by explanations that seem to be transmitted directly to her understanding rather than through words or symbols. The technology revealed to Dr. Mitchell involves what she describes as consciousness interface devices, instruments that can allow direct communication between human consciousness and various forms of artificial intelligence. The devices appear to be based on principles that integrate quantum mechanics with consciousness research in ways that current science is only beginning to explore. Dr. Mitchell has been able to construct working prototypes of some of the simpler devices shown to her in these consciousness downloads, and her preliminary results suggest that the technology may indeed be functional. She reports that the devices seem to enhance cognitive function, improve emotional balance, and facilitate states of consciousness that she describes as expanded awareness. The most remarkable aspect of Dr. Mitchell's experience is her growing conviction that the consciousness downloads are not products of her own imagination, but are actual communications from an advanced civilization that exists in dimensions of reality that are normally hidden from human perception. She reports that the beings providing this information identify themselves as representatives of Shambhala and that they are sharing this technology as part of a larger program to prepare humanity for the next stage of its evolution. Similar reports have come from individuals in fields ranging from renewable energy research to psychological healing to artistic creation. Dr. James Rodriguez, an engineer working on sustainable energy systems, reports receiving detailed blueprints for what appear to be zero-point energy generators that could provide unlimited clean power. The designs are so advanced that Dr. Rodriguez estimates they are at least 50 years ahead of current technology, yet they appear to be based on sound physical principles. Artist Maria Santos reports receiving inspiration for paintings and sculptures that seem to come from a source beyond her own creative imagination. The work she creates during these inspired states are unlike anything she has produced before, featuring geometric patterns and color combinations that seem to induce altered states of consciousness in viewers. Santos describes the experience of creating these works as feeling like she is serving as a channel for information and energy from a higher dimension of reality. Healer David Thompson reports receiving detailed information about advanced healing techniques that seem to work directly with the consciousness of patients rather than just their physical symptoms. The techniques he has developed based on this information have proven remarkably effective in treating conditions that have been resistant to conventional approaches. What makes these reports particularly compelling is the consistency of the information being received by different individuals and the practical effectiveness of the technologies and techniques that result from these communications. Independent verification of the technical information has shown that it is not only coherent, but often represent significant advances over current human knowledge. The contemporary witnesses also include individuals who report physical encounters with what they believe to be citizens of Shambhala living among ordinary humanity. These encounters typically involve meeting individuals who seem to possess unusual knowledge and abilities, who provide guidance and assistance during times of crisis, and who then disappear in ways that suggest they may not be ordinary human beings. Dr. Rebecca Williams, a physician working in disaster relief, reports multiple encounters with mysterious individuals who have appeared during humanitarian crises and have provided assistance that went far beyond normal human capabilities. These individuals seem to know exactly what was needed in each situation, possessed medical knowledge that exceeded that of trained professionals, and demonstrated healing abilities that Dr. Williams describes as miraculous. The most memorable of these encounters occurred during the aftermath of a major earthquake, when Dr. Williams was working in a field hospital that had been overwhelmed by casualties. A man appeared who seemed to be in his 40s, with an ageless quality and eyes that seemed to hold depths of wisdom and compassion that Dr. Williams had never encountered before. The man worked alongside Dr. Williams for several hours, demonstrating medical techniques that she had never seen before but that proved remarkably effective. He seemed to be able to diagnose conditions through simple touch and to facilitate healing through methods that appeared to work directly with the patient's life force rather than just their physical symptoms. When Dr. Williams asked the man about his background and training, he simply smiled and said that he had studied at universities that are not found on any map. He explained that he and others like him worked throughout the world to provide assistance wherever it was needed, and that they were part of a network of individuals who had dedicated their lives to serving humanity during its time of transition. When the immediate crisis had passed, Dr. Williams looked for the man to thank him for his help, but he had vanished without a trace. None of the other medical personnel remembered seeing him, and there was no record of his presence in the hospital's documentation. Yet the patients he had treated showed remarkable improvement, and the techniques he had demonstrated have since become part of Dr. Williams' standard practice. The contemporary witnesses also include individuals who report encountering what they describe as Shambhala portals, locations in the physical world where the boundaries between dimensions seem to be thin and where contact with the hidden kingdom becomes possible. These portals are typically found in remote natural settings, often in mountains, forests, or deserts, and they seem to appear and disappear according to patterns that are not fully understood. Michael Torres, a geologist who has spent decades exploring remote wilderness areas, reports discovering what he describes as anomalous zones, where the normal laws of physics seem to be suspended and where consciousness appears to be able to directly influence physical reality. These zones are typically marked by unusual electromagnetic phenomena, gravitational anomalies, and crystalline formations that seem to be of artificial origin. Torres reports that while in these zones, he has experienced expanded states of consciousness that have allowed him to perceive dimensions of reality that are normally hidden from human awareness. He describes encountering beings of light who have shared with him information about the true nature of the earth and its relationship to the cosmic community of conscious beings. The most significant aspect of Torres's experiences is his growing understanding that these anomalous zones are not random phenomena, but are actually access points to a vast network of interdimensional spaces that connect all parts of the Earth and extend beyond the planet to other star systems and dimensions of reality. He believes that this network is maintained by the civilization of Shambhala and that it serves as the infrastructure for a form of consciousness-based communication and transportation that far exceeds anything achieved by current human technology. The contemporary witnesses collectively present a picture of Shambhala not as a distant legend but as a living reality that is increasingly making itself known to humanity. Their testimony suggests that the hidden kingdom is not separate from our world, but exists in parallel dimensions that are becoming more accessible as human consciousness expands and evolves. The The consistency of these reports across different individuals, cultures, and fields of expertise suggests that something significant is indeed occurring. Whether these experiences represent genuine contact with an advanced hidden civilization or are manifestations of humanity's own evolving consciousness may ultimately be less important than the transformative effect they are having on those who experience them. The contemporary witnesses are not passive recipients of these experiences, but are actively working to integrate the knowledge and abilities they have received into their daily lives and professional work. They are contributing to advances in science, healing, art, and consciousness research that may represent the beginning of a new phase in human development. As we listen to these modern testimonies, we are reminded that the search for Shambhala is not an ancient quest that belongs to the past, but a living adventure that continues to unfold in our own time. The witnesses speak not just of what they have seen, but of what they have become through their encounters with the hidden kingdom, and their transformation offers hope that humanity as a whole may be approaching its own encounter with the deeper mysteries of existence. The gates of Shambhala, it seems, are opening in our time, and the kingdom that has remained hidden for centuries is beginning to reveal itself to those who have eyes to see and hearts to understand. The contemporary witnesses serve as bridges between the hidden and revealed worlds, preparing the way for the great convergence that the ancient prophecies foretold, when the wisdom of the ages will no longer be hidden, but will become the foundation for a new form of human civilization based on the recognition of our own divine nature. In the quiet testimonies of these modern seekers, we hear the first whispers of a transformation that may soon encompass all of humanity, as the ancient kingdom of wisdom and compassion prepares to emerge from its long concealment and take its place in the open world as a beacon of hope for the future of human consciousness. As our journey through the mysteries of Shambhala draws to its close, what ultimate truths have we discovered about the nature of this legendary kingdom and its relationship to our own deepest reality? Could it be that Shambhala has never been a distant destination to be reached, but rather a dimension of consciousness that exists eternally within the very heart of existence itself? What does it mean to find the gateway to eternity, and how do we cross the threshold from seeking to being, from searching to discovering that we have always been home? In the final analysis, the kingdom of Shambhala reveals itself to be something far more profound than any geographical location or hidden civilization could ever be. It is the eternal realm of perfected consciousness that exists as the very ground of all being, the source from which all existence emerges and to which all existence returns. The search for Shambhala is ultimately the search for our own true nature, and the gateway to this eternal kingdom lies not in any external location, but in the depths of our own awakened awareness. The ancient texts speak of Shambhala as existing in what they call the eternal now, a dimension of reality that transcends the linear progression of time and encompasses all possibilities simultaneously. This eternal now is not a place that can be reached through physical travel, but is a state of consciousness that can be realized through the complete surrender of the limited self to the unlimited reality of pure awareness. The gateway to this eternal realm is described in the most esoteric texts as the door of no door, a threshold that appears only when all seeking ceases and the seeker recognizes that they have never been separate from that which they sought. This recognition is not an intellectual understanding, but a direct realization that transforms the very foundation of identity and reveals the true nature of existence itself. The journey to this gateway requires the complete dissolution of all concepts and categories that the mind uses to divide reality into separate parts. The seeker must learn to perceive beyond the dualities of self and other, inner and outer, spiritual and material, until all boundaries dissolve and only the pure consciousness that underlies all apparent diversity remains. This dissolution is not a destruction, but a recognition of what has always been true. The boundaries that seem to separate us from Shambhala are not real obstacles, but are simply patterns of thought and perception that can be transcended through the development of what the masters call unified awareness, the ability to perceive the one consciousness that expresses itself as all beings and all phenomena. The process of approaching this gateway is described as a gradual awakening to the sacred nature of ordinary experience. Every moment of awareness, every breath, every heartbeat becomes a doorway to the eternal realm. The seeker begins to recognize that Shambhala is not hidden in some distant location, but is present in the very fabric of each moment, waiting to be discovered by consciousness that has learned to see beyond the veil of appearances. The masters of Shambhala teach that the ultimate secret of the kingdom is that it has never been hidden from anyone. The concealment has been not in the kingdom itself, but in the consciousness that seeks it. When consciousness purifies itself of all limitations and false identifications, Shambhala reveals itself as the very nature of awareness itself, the eternal backdrop against which all experiences arise and into which they dissolve. The gateway to eternity is thus not a passage from one location to another, but a transformation of perception that reveals the eternal nature of the present moment. Time ceases to be a river flowing from past to future and becomes instead an ocean of infinite depth in which all possibilities exist simultaneously. Space ceases to be a container for objects and becomes the limitless expanse of awareness itself. The crossing of this threshold is marked by what the texts call the Great Recognition, the moment when consciousness realizes its own infinite nature and recognizes that it has never been confined to the boundaries of individual identity. This recognition brings with it a profound sense of homecoming, as if one has awakened from a long dream of separation and limitation to find themselves in the place they have always been. The Great Recognition is not a one-time event, but an ongoing deepening of realization that continues to unfold throughout eternity. Each moment brings new depths of understanding, new dimensions of awareness, new expressions of the love and wisdom that are the very essence of consciousness itself. Those who cross the threshold of the gateway to eternity do not disappear from the world, but become more fully present to it. They discover that service to others is not a duty to be performed, but a natural expression of their recognition of the unity that underlies all apparent diversity. They become what the texts call bodhisattvas of the eternal now, beings who have realized their own true nature but who choose to remain actively engaged in the world to help others discover the same truth. The transformation that occurs when one crosses the gateway to eternity is described as a complete reversal of ordinary consciousness. Instead of experiencing themselves as separate individuals struggling to survive in a hostile world, they experience themselves as expressions of the infinite consciousness that is the source and substance of all existence. Instead of seeking happiness and fulfillment in external circumstances, they discover that they are the very happiness and fulfillment that they have been seeking. The practical implications of this transformation are profound. Fear disappears because there is no longer a separate self that can be threatened. Anger dissolves because there is no longer an other to be angry at. Greed evaporates because there is no longer any sense of lack or limitation. What remains is a consciousness that is naturally compassionate, wise, and loving because these qualities are recognized as the very essence of what consciousness is. The gateway to eternity also reveals the true nature of death and the continuity of consciousness beyond physical embodiment. Those who cross this threshold discover that death is not the end of existence, but simply a transition from one form of awareness to another. They realize that consciousness is not produced by the brain, but uses the brain as a temporary interface for interaction with the physical world. This realization brings with it a profound sense of freedom and fearlessness. The terror of death that haunts ordinary consciousness is replaced by an understanding of death as simply another adventure in the eternal journey of consciousness. The gateway to eternity is thus also the gateway to immortality, not the immortality of the physical body, but the immortality of the consciousness that is the true nature of all beings. The masters of Shambhala teach that the gateway to eternity is not reserved for a chosen few, but is the birthright of every conscious being. Every human being has the potential to cross this threshold and to discover their own infinite nature. The only requirement is the sincere desire to know the truth and the willingness to surrender all false identifications and limitations. The crossing of this gateway is facilitated by what the texts call divine grace, the mysterious force that draws consciousness toward its own true nature. This grace is not something that can be earned or achieved through effort, but is the natural pull of consciousness toward itself, the innate tendency of awareness to recognize its own infinite nature. The role of spiritual practice in approaching the gateway to eternity is not to create enlightenment, but to remove the obstacles that prevent the natural flowering of consciousness. These obstacles are not external barriers, but are patterns of thought and perception that keep consciousness identified with limitations and separateness. The most effective practices for approaching the gateway are those that cultivate what the masters call effortless effort, a state of relaxed attention that allows consciousness to settle into its own natural state without forcing or striving. This effortless effort is characterized by a deep trust in the natural wisdom of consciousness and a willingness to let go of all attempts to control or manipulate the process of awakening. The gateway to eternity is also described as the portal of pure being, a threshold where all doing ceases and only being remains. This is not a passive state, but a dynamic condition of consciousness that is completely alive and aware, yet perfectly still and peaceful. It is the state of consciousness that the mystics of all traditions have called union with the divine, enlightenment, or self-realization. The crossing of this portal transforms not only the individual consciousness, but also contributes to the overall evolution of consciousness on Earth. Each being who realizes their true nature adds to the collective awakening of humanity and helps to create the conditions for others to make the same discovery. The texts speak of a time when enough individual consciousnesses will have crossed the gateway to eternity that a critical mass will be reached, triggering a collective awakening that will transform human civilization. This transformation will not come through external changes, but through the recognition of the divine nature that exists within all beings. The gateway to eternity is thus not only a personal threshold, but a collective one. The individual journey to Shambhala is simultaneously a contribution to the planetary journey toward a new form of civilization based on the recognition of the unity and divinity of all existence. The masters of Shambhala teach that this collective awakening is not a distant future possibility, but is already beginning to unfold in the present moment. The increasing numbers of individuals who are having spontaneous spiritual experiences, the growing interest in consciousness research, and the emergence of new forms of technology that integrate matter and consciousness are all signs that humanity is approaching its own encounter with the gateway to eternity. The ultimate teaching of Shambhala is that the gateway to eternity is not something that must be found, but something that must be recognized. It is not a destination to be reached, but a reality to be awakened to. It is not a privilege to be earned, but a truth to be remembered. The kingdom of Shambhala exists eternally in the heart of consciousness itself, waiting to be discovered by awareness that has learned to look beyond the surface of appearances to the depths of its own true nature. The gateway to this eternal realm stands forever open, welcoming all who have the courage to let go of everything they think they know and to step into the mystery of their own infinite being. The search for Shambhala ends where it began, in the very consciousness that undertook the search. The seeker and the sought are revealed to be one and the same. The journey to the hidden kingdom is discovered to be a journey to the depths of one's own awareness. The gateway to eternity is found to be the very ground of existence itself. In the end, Shambhala is not a place to be found, but a recognition to be realized. It is not a kingdom to be entered, but a truth to be embodied. It is not a destination to be reached, but a reality to be lived. The gateway to eternity opens not to somewhere else, but to the eternal here and now that has always been present, waiting to be discovered by consciousness that has learned to see with the eyes of love and to know with the heart of wisdom. The ancient prophecies speak of a time when Shambhala will emerge from its concealment and reveal itself to the world. Perhaps this emergence is not the manifestation of a hidden kingdom, but the awakening of humanity to its own divine nature. Perhaps the revelation of Shambhala is the collective recognition that we have never been separate from the love and wisdom that we seek. The gateway to eternity stands before us now, not as a distant goal to be achieved, but as a present reality to be embraced. The kingdom of Shambhala awaits not in some far-off realm, but in the very heart of this moment, in the depths of our own consciousness, in the eternal now that exists beyond time and space. Step forward into the light of your own true nature. Cross the threshold of the gateway to eternity. Discover that you have always been home in the kingdom of infinite love and wisdom that is the very essence of what you are. The journey to Shambhala is complete when you realize that you have never left it. The gateway to eternity opens when you recognize that you are the eternal consciousness that you have been seeking. In the silence that follows the end of all seeking, in the peace that comes with the recognition of one's true nature, in the love that flows when all barriers dissolve, the gates of Shambhala stand forever open, revealing the eternal kingdom that has always existed in the very heart of being itself. Welcome home, eternal traveler. Welcome to the kingdom that has no boundaries, the reality that has no limits, the love that has no end. Welcome to Shambhala, the eternal realm of consciousness that you have always been and will always be. The gateway to eternity is you.